professors and helping us and guiding us on issues that are really affecting us. This morning, again, I want to bring to your attention that for the past few weeks, except last week, we have been looking at research designs. So we started looking at research methods, research methodology, research approach. Really concerns students. What do these things mean? How do I choose a research design? And of course, as students, many times we go and look at other people's dissertations, look at other people's work, and then I see there that somebody used explanatory research. I also carry that very approach and put it in my work, but without really understanding why did that person use that kind of approach. So we again realize that as students, we at different levels of our research journey, and some people had already gone beyond, already submitted their proposals. So we took off some time last week and decided to talk about scholarly writing. And we had a video on that, and we had our very own Professor Joseph Mutai coming in to put in more light on scholarly writing. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we want to go back again to our research designs, and we want to specifically focus on looking at how do I choose an appropriate research design for my work. And I want to interest all of us, especially we the students this morning, to pick some few lessons from this clip that I'm going to share on research designs. And then from there, we'll be able to come back after some few minutes, be able to come back and discuss and share experiences on research design. And then we will be able to close the student session at exactly 4, and then we move into the main agenda of the day. So welcome with me to watch this clip as we move on.
Welcome to the tutorial on quantitative research design. This is Dr. Zach Q, and we're going to spend the next 20 to 30 minutes talking about quantitative research designs. Just like any great builder starts out with a blueprint to guide and direct the construction of a building, a researcher needs to start out with a research design to really guide decisions that need to be made about conducting the research, about making plans. A research design does 3 things. It says when and how often data is collected, what data needs to be gathered and from whom, and how to analyze the data. In this tutorial, we're going to talk about several different quantitative research designs. We're going to discuss when they're used and why they should be chosen. And ultimately, the purpose of this tutorial is to help you identify the most appropriate research design for your research study and to help you justify why it's the best choice. Now, before we move on and start talking about research designs, I want to make a note. Some of you for your research plans will actually choose multiple research designs, and this is called a mixed design study. For example, you may choose a causal comparative and a correlational design. This is different than a mixed method approach. A mixed method approach is a full quantitative and full qualitative design. It really requires that you conduct a full-blown quantitative study and a full-blown qualitative study. In essence, you're committing to conduct 2 separate studies. But here we're only going to talk about quantitative research design with the assumption that you've chosen a quantitative design for your study. Now, there are numerous quantitative research designs, too numerous to really cover here. So we're going to focus our attention primarily on the major designs proposed by Campbell and Stanley in 1963 and Kroll in 1993. They say that there are three primary categories of studies. There's descriptive studies, and descriptive studies are done when a researcher wants to know what is. Let's take Charlie, for example. Charlie is a graduate student, and he's interested in college students who have anxiety disorders, because let's say that his cousin has an anxiety disorder. If he simply wants to know how many students who enter college in, let's say, 2012, have an anxiety disorder, a clinically diagnosed anxiety disorder, he may do a descriptive study. He simply wants to know what exists. The next category are correlational studies, and these can be relationship-focused studies or predictive-focused studies. In a correlational study, you really want to know, is there a relationship between two different variables, or does a group of variables or one variable predict another variable? In our example of Charlie, Charlie may want to know, is there a relationship between achievement in a freshman English class and the presence of an anxiety disorder? He wants to know simply, is there a relationship, not if one's causing the other, but is there a relationship between the two? He may also ask, does the presence of an anxiety disorder predict achievement in a college freshman English class? The final category is group comparison, and this usually involves manipulation or treatment of some type. And there are three types. There's a pre-experimental, quasi-experimental, and true experimental. And we'll define those in a few minutes. But really here, let's go back to Charlie. If he wants to do a group comparison study, he's interested in, is there a difference in two different groups, or does a specific treatment affect something else? So, for example, let's say he finds out that there is a relationship between the presence of an anxiety disorder and academic achievement in a college English class. And he finds that the presence of a disorder actually decreases academic achievement. So he wants to do an intervention. Maybe he asks for volunteers who have generalized anxiety disorder. He provides one group with a special treatment that helps them lower their anxiety during the English class, and he doesn't provide the other group with the treatment. And then he compares the two at the end to determine, does the treatment ultimately affect academic achievement in the college English class? He's doing a group comparison. We're going to take a more in-depth look at each of these specific research designs. But before we do, I want to identify or talk about a few additional designs that some of you may choose to do. In addition to the designs that I just overviewed, some of you may choose to do an instrument development, a content or document analysis, a meta-analysis, or a single subject design. Let me talk a little bit about three of those. First of all, some of you may choose to do an instrument development. Oftentimes, when you go to conduct quantitative research, you find that the instrument that you were hoping to find doesn't exist, and an instrument needs to be developed. And so you decide to develop an instrument and conduct statistical analysis to determine its validity and reliability. This is a very, very rigorous and intense type of design. Some of you may choose to do some type of document or content analysis, and that is analyzing some type of communication. And so for something that I see often, or this is that students will analyze a discussion forum to determine the presence of, let's say, community in a discussion forum in an online class. Another example of this may be looking at lesson plans, analyzing lesson plans for a specific variable. The last is a single subject design. For those of you that are really interested in a specific counseling group or a special education group, and you have a small sample size, you may want to consider this design. It's a really valid research design, and it's similar to a time series design, which we'll talk about, in which each participant really serves as their own control, and they're observed repeatedly. Usually what happens is, let's say, for example, we're looking at children with autism, and we want to teach them a basic skill such as hand washing. What we would do is you would baseline them. So you would establish a baseline for each participant. How many steps of the hand washing procedure can they do? You would then, at different times, implement a treatment that maybe teaches them hand washing, and then you would observe the behavior after the treatment. And this is called a single subject design. If you're really interested in doing this design, Wasson 2003 has a great book that I highly, highly recommend. But for the purpose of this tutorial, we're going to go back and focus on the main designs that Campbell and Stanley talk about. So let's go ahead and focus on those. The first type of study we're going to look at is a descriptive study. And descriptive studies focus on what is. We really aim to understand what is happening, what is in a specific situation with an identified population. And they're usually used to gain knowledge, to identify a problem or identify what is so that further research can be conducted. It's important to note here that oftentimes descriptive studies are not very rigorous in nature. So a lot of universities don't allow basic descriptive studies for things such as theses and dissertations. And that's the case at Liberty. We really don't allow them and without special permission. But it is important that you know and you understand what a descriptive study is. If I was a researcher and I wanted to do a descriptive study, let's say response to intervention is fairly new term. It's a new type of intervention in the school systems, and I simply want to know what is the attitude of school counselors about the use of response to intervention. I would do a descriptive study. Another descriptive study maybe what responsibilities do school counselors even have in RTI as it's implemented in their school. So just in general, I want to know what are school counselors doing to help implement RTI in the school. I would do a descriptive study. Now, most research texts identify two different types of descriptive studies, a survey study and an observational study. A survey study uses some type of written document or online questionnaire or interview to gather information about what is. And there's usually two basic types of survey studies, and that's longitudinal designs and cross-sectional designs. Longitudinal designs study a population over a period of time. They oftentimes are referred to as trend studies or cohort studies or panel studies. So maybe going back to our example of Charlie, maybe he wants to study the academic achievement of students identified with anxiety disorder in their freshman year of college, their junior year of college, and their senior year of college. He's studying them over a period of time. A cross-sectional study then just looks at individuals at one point in time. So again, going back to our example of Charlie, Charlie simply wants to know what is the academic achievement of freshman college students with an anxiety disorder. So he just is looking at one specific point in time about what is. Oftentimes, surveys collect data on attitudes and beliefs. Then, like I said, the other type of design is the observational design, and this is the process of observing something that's happening and making a conclusion about it. So, for example, I may go into a school system and observe teachers or observe school counselors. Again, just as a reminder, descriptive studies oftentimes are not rigorous enough for dissertations and theses, and that's the case at Liberty. We oftentimes don't allow descriptive designs for dissertation purposes. However, descriptive studies can be very important as you build a case for a thesis or a dissertation because they are describing what the problem is. Now let's look at another type of study. The next design we're going to talk about is one that I didn't mention above, but it's similar to a group comparison study, and that's a causal comparative study. The aim of a causal comparative study is really to examine the possible cause and effect relationship between variables that exist. You're studying a phenomenon after the fact. That is, it's already occurred either naturally or it's been manipulated. Let's consider some examples. If you want to examine gender or ethnicity as an independent variable, you have a causal comparative study. It's something that you as the researcher have not manipulated. If gender occurs naturally, ethnicity occurs naturally. If you as a researcher wanted to examine individuals that smoked versus individuals that didn't smoke. That has already happened. They've already chosen that behavior. Another example would be an intervention that is naturally occurring within a school system and is not occurring in another school system. You want to study something that's already been implemented. Oftentimes, causal comparative studies are used in educational research because it's too difficult, too unethical, or impossible to manipulate the independent variable. So, for example, it's unethical for me to tell one group of individuals, let's say one group of students, to smoke and another group not to smoke. Maybe there's a specific intervention, a school-wide intervention happening at a school, and you can't ask the whole school to implement this new intervention just for your research study. That would be too difficult. And since it's naturally occurring, you can go ahead and study it. Now, it's important to note that a causal comparative study is almost identical to a pre-experimental design, and we'll talk about in a little bit that that's not a credible design. But the difference is that oftentimes a causal comparative study has a control group. Actually, it always has a control group. So what you're looking at with a causal comparative design is you're looking at a phenomenon or something that's happened, and you're comparing it with something else. So for example, a school has this dynamic program that they're implementing, and you're going to compare that school's students' achievement level to another school that's not using that specific treatment. When we talk about threats to validity, we'll talk about all the controls that need to be in place, because again, there's lots of threats to validity, but this is a valid type of study. I like to give you an example of a question that might be used with a causal comparative study. For example, I may say, is there a difference in male and female university students' social presence while participating in an 8-week online class? I simply want to know, is there a difference in their social presence between males and females? And again, I can't manipulate it. It's unethical and impossible for me to manipulate gender. And so I would choose a causal comparative study. As we're talking about causal comparative studies, there's a few additional notes that I want to make about this specific design, and especially take note of this if you're planning to use this type of design. Note that like a descriptive study, a causal comparative design does not require the researcher to exert control or manipulate the phenomenon. However, unlike a descriptive study, you are looking at the possible cause and effect relationship between variables, and therefore you have an independent variable with at least two levels, at least two groups that you're comparing, and you have a dependent variable. You're looking at the possible effect that independent variable has on the dependent variable. And note that I said possible cause and effect. This is really, really important language if you choose a causal comparative design. You cannot prove, you cannot state that you have a cause and effect relationship if you have a causal comparative design, because there are too many threats to validity. So make sure if you choose a causal comparative design, you're using correct terminology. And just as a reminder, when you choose a causal comparative design, you do so because it's too difficult, too unethical, or impossible for you as the researcher to manipulate the independent variable. Also note that oftentimes causal comparative designs are chosen because you want to explore a phenomenon that's happening. If a lot of causal comparative research has been done in a specific area, and you're finding a lot of causal comparative literature or research in that specific area you're studying, it probably means that we need to start moving more toward more rigorous research, such as an experimental design, which we're going to talk about next. So that's the causal comparative design. Actually, before we talk about experimental research designs, we're going to talk about the correlational research designs. A correlational design, like a causal comparative study, is used for exploratory or beginning research to determine if there is truly more rigorous research that's warranted. The purpose of a correlational study is simply to examine if a relationship exists between variables. Is there a relationship between, like we said in the case of Charlie, is there a relationship between the presence of an anxiety disorder, so whether or not somebody has an anxiety disorder, and their academic achievement or their grade in a freshman college class? Other examples of correlational studies may be, is there a relationship between high school GPA and college board SAT scores? We know in the research that some research says there is and some research says there isn't. If you choose to do a correlational design, it's important that you recognize that you cannot speak in terms of cause and effect. You simply have two variables of interest. One does not cause the other because you don't know the direction of the cause and effect. You can't guarantee that one variable caused another. All you know is that they are varying together. Either, let's say we're looking at two scores such as GPA and SAT, we just want to know, do they increase and do they decrease together? Also, you may be looking at predictive. I remember I said at the beginning, there are two basic types of correlational designs. There's ones that look at relationship, and thus far, everything I've described is been in terms of relationship. There's also predictive studies. If you want to know, do SAT scores predict college SAT scores? That you can look at, does one variable predict another variable? Now, it's important to note, and especially in talking about prediction, that you have a solid theoretical or conceptual framework in which you're basing that study. Oftentimes with predictive studies, there's been multiple studies that has shown that there's relationship between certain variables or multiple variables, and you want to add to that conceptual or that model or that theoretical model. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. We know that there's been a lot of research on high school GPA and SAT scores, performance in college, and we've seen that not only does high school GPA predict SAT scores, but also gender and ethnicity. And sometimes there's an interaction between gender and ethnicity and socioeconomic status and high school GPA and the results of an SAT score. So let's say in the literature, I find a strong conceptual base or a model that says gender and ethnicity and socioeconomic status and GPA predict SAT scores. Let's say that model predicts let's say 60% of the SAT score. That means there's still 40% of the model that's unexplained. And maybe I have another framework or another theory that says parental attendance at college is another important piece of the pie, so then I'm going to test that. So it's important in correlational designs that you really have a strong theoretical or conceptual rationale for every variable that you plan to study, not just ones that you think, but there needs to be research and theory that backs it up. Again, I want to reiterate, if you choose a correlational study, if you want to look at the relationship between two variables or multiple variables, note that you can only make statements about relationship, and you use this design because there's a very little research in the area and it's exploratory. You're only beginning research in the area, or the models that have been presented, specifically predictive models that have been presented, are not complete. There's still parts of it that are unexplained. Now we're going to focus our attention on experimental designs. Campbell and Stanley in 1963 purported that there are three primary experimental designs, and that's the pre-experimental design, the true experimental design, and the quasi-experimental design. And the distinguishing factor or distinguishing characteristic of all experimental design is that the researcher manipulates the independent variable. That is, the researcher actually conducts the treatment, does something to the participants. So let's look at these three types of designs. As we discuss these three types of designs, there are commonly used symbols in research texts, and actually Stanley in 1963 are the ones that proposed these symbols. But anyway, there are these symbols in research texts that help us visually see the designs that we're talking about. And so we're going to use those symbols as we talk about these different designs over the next few slides. And the X simply means the exposure to treatment. That means there's been a treatment done. O represents observation or the measurement, the dependent variable, really what you're measuring. Multiple rows reflect multiple groups, and R reflects randomization, and I'll define these more in a little bit. We're going to start by discussing pre-experimental designs, and the primary characteristic of a pre-experimental design is that the researcher manipulated the independent variable. Oftentimes, pre-experimental designs are used as preliminary research or pilot studies to determine the effectiveness of a treatment, to see if there's more research that's warranted. Campbell and Stanley really say that pre-experimental designs are weak and have little to no value. It's important to note that pre-experimental designs are distinguished as separate from quasi-experimental designs in texts such as Campbell and Stanley, but not so much in Borg and Gall. So some research texts don't even acknowledge or pre-experimental designs, or they wrap them into quasi-experimental designs or the quasi-experimental design discussion. I bring up pre-experimental designs here because I want you to be able to recognize them, and I want you to recognize that they are not rigorous studies. They, like Campbell and Stanley said, they have no value. So for a dissertation or a thesis, they really shouldn't be done. They are, however, often used in program evaluation for school systems and can be very effective for that purpose. An example of a question that may be asked for pre-experimental design is simply, does parent scores on a parent skill assessment increase after participation in a successful parenting program? Let's look at what a design, that would be probably a one-shot case study. Let's look at what that looks like in the next slide. Here are commonly used pre-experimental designs. As I just mentioned, the question I just proposed, do parents increase in their skills, or do parents have better parenting skills after a parenting intervention? That's an example of a one-shot case study. Parents are given a parenting skill intervention, and then their parenting skills are measured. Now, you probably already see the weakness in this study. I'll give you a moment to think about it. Do you have it? The problem with this is I can't say it was the intervention that caused this parenting skills. Perhaps parents already have the skills. Perhaps they were watching a parenting program, and that caused the score they got in the parenting skill, let's say, survey or measurement that I used. So I really can't say it was the intervention that caused the effect on the parent or caused the parenting skills. Additional pre-experimental designs are the one group pre-test, post-test. Again, here I was going back to our parenting example, I would give parents a pre-test to measure their parenting skills. I do the intervention, and then I give them the post-test. Now, this may be a stronger design because I can see if there was an increase or decrease in parenting skills, but it might have been the pre-test that caused the increase on the post-test. So again, I can't say it was the parenting skill class that actually caused the intervention or caused the increase or decrease in the parenting skills. Similar weakness in the post-test only non-equivalent group design. If I have two groups and I give one parenting skills and don't give it to the other and then measure them at the end, it may be simple group differences that caused the differences in the parenting skills and not actually the intervention. So these are pre-experimental designs. Let me give you one more example and see if you can identify the design. Let's go back to our case of Charlie. Let's say Charlie has a group of students, freshman college students, who have an anxiety disorder, and he gives them an anxiety intervention, and it helps them reduce their anxiety about their academics or in their classes. And then he post-tests to see if there is a decrease in their anxiety. Again, the problem is if he has one group, he does the intervention, he measures them, it may not be the treatment that actually caused the effect, the lowering, let's say, of the anxiety skills. So again, Pre-experimental designs, it's important to know what they are. They can be very effective in program evaluation, sort of exploring, is it even worth going on and examining a treatment further? However, for a dissertation, they are not acceptable designs. As you can see, there's major threats to validity, and you can't talk about cause and effect relationships. So let's look at two experimental designs that are often used and are some of the strongest designs that can be used for a dissertation. Let's first talk about quasi-experimental designs. Now, the quasi-experimental design is often used in educational research because it's more convenient and less disruptive than the stronger true experimental design. The purpose of a quasi-experimental design is to test the effectiveness of an intervention or treatment with a target population. It really allows the researcher to control the treatments and look to see if the intervention had an effect on the identified dependent variable. The most rigorous design aside from the true experimental design, and often chosen in educational research because it's more convenient and less disruptive. Let's look at an example of that. Let's say that you wanted to look at problem-based pedagogy for teaching math. And so you ask the question, what effect does participation in a math lesson developed using a problem-based pedagogy have on second grade students' math achievement scores when compared to participation in a math lesson that was developed using traditional pedagogy? And you have Mrs. Smith's class and Mrs. Jones's class. And Mrs. Smith's class, or Mrs. Smith, you train to use the problem-based pedagogy approach. And Mrs. Jones, she continues using the traditional approach. And your specific target population is second grade students. Now, it'd be really nice, we're going to talk about random and assignment in a moment. It'd be really nice to randomly assign students to either Mrs. Smith's class or Mrs. Jones's class. However, that's probably not possible in an educational situation. You can't just go randomly assigning students to classes. Therefore, you use Mrs. Smith's class that's already been put together and Mrs. Jones' class. One gets the treatment, one doesn't, and you compare their math achievement scores at the end. You used already composed classes, and so that's a quasi-experimental design. Let's look at more specifically, let's look at specific types of quasi-experimental designs. If you choose to conduct a quasi-experimental design, you may use one of these specific designs. Probably most prominent is the one that I just explained, and that's the non-equivalent pre-test, post-test control group design. And that's the middle one here, represented in our with our little X's and O's. What you do is you pre-test students. So you give both, let's say you gave Mrs. Smith's class and Mrs. Jones's class a pre-test. You want to find out what their math achievement was prior to the intervention. You then give Miss Smith's class the intervention. You don't give it to Mrs. Jones's class, and then you post-test them. This way, you can actually see if the groups were equivalent in their math achievement prior to the intervention. So you know if it was the intervention or not that caused the post-test scores. An interrupted time series design is very similar to that, where you create a baseline. So you would actually give, let's say, multiple math achievement tests. Prior to the intervention, you give one group the intervention, and then you do multiple post-tests. Another design is the counterbalance design. And this one can be very effective at looking at when you want to do multiple treatments and you give each group a different regimen of the treatment and then compare them so you can see what the effect is. Now, this is a great design. One of the weaknesses, as you can see, would be you're adding multiple, or you're adding more groups. And again, sometimes in educational research, it can be difficult when you have multiple groups because each group needs to be fairly large. When we talk about statistical convention and power, when we talk about analysis, you'll see that you probably need anywhere between 30 and 60 individuals per group. Again, just to recap, a quasi-experimental design is often used in educational research. It includes both, it has two primary characteristics, and that's manipulation. You as the researcher actually cause the treatment, you manipulate the independent variable, and there's always a control group, a comparison group. Now, talking about control comparison group, let me stop here for a moment and talk about that. There are different types of control groups, and you need to decide what type of control group you are going to use. Kasdan 2003 book has a great discussion on different types of control groups you have. Most of the time in educational research, you're going to use a no treatment control group of some sort, or a non-specific treatment group, in which one group gets an intervention and the other group is the same in every single aspect, in every single way, except for that intervention. And let me also say this, when you're thinking about that control group, it's important that the element that you're studying is the only thing different. So for example, I can't compare Mrs. Jones's math class to Mrs. Smith's English class, or compare a sixth grade math class to a fifth grade math class. Everything about the intervention needs to be the same. So the content of the material, everything needs to be very, very similar except for the intervention. But anyway, when we're talking about control groups, or a group that's there as a comparison group, it's important to identify that there are different types of groups. And again, I highly, highly recommend Kasdan as you talk about this. And he talks about factors that you really need to consider when choosing your control, and that's the intent of your research, previous research that's been done, as well as ethical and practical considerations. Let me go back and just remind you, quasi-experimental design has two characteristics, manipulation and control. It is often used in educational research because it's too impossible or not ethical to do the more rigorous true experimental design, which we're going to talk about next. And really the aim of a quasi-experimental design is to determine the effectiveness of some type of intervention. If you're thinking about a causal comparative study and you have the opportunity to do a quasi-experimental study, I highly, highly recommend you consider a quasi-experimental study. It's a much more rigorous, it's a better research design. There's less threats to internal validity. The last design we're going to talk about is the true experimental design, and this design is truly the most rigorous design, and ultimately the design that you want to choose if you have the opportunity to do so. The purpose of this design is to examine the cause and effect relationship between variables. You really investigate the possible cause and effect relationship by exposing one or more experimental groups to some type of treatment that you as the researcher do, and you compare those results to one or more control groups not receiving the treatment. Again, this is considered the most rigorous design. Examples of questions that you may ask if you're doing a true experimental design is there a difference in students' sense of community based on the type of technology they're using in a class? So for example, let's say I have two classes. One class does all of their discussion via Blackboard discussion. Another class does all of their discussion via Skype. And I want to compare, does community differ among the students? So everything in the classes are exactly the same except the technology that's used for the discussion. And obviously there's theoretical and conceptual reasons for why of true experimental designs. One of the most rigorous designs is the post-test only design. In this case, you randomize your groups, you do random assignment. Notice I said random assignment, not random selection, random assignment. So I have my group of volunteers. In the example I gave, I used college students, let's say. I have a group of them and then I randomly assign one to treatment, one to non-treatment. I do the treatment and then I post-test both of them. There's also a pre-test, post-test equivalent group design in which is exactly what I just explained. However, you randomize them, you do a pre-test, you give one group the experiment or the treatment, and then you, not the other group, and then you post-test them. Now, Campbell and Stanley say that this design introduces a threat to validity, and that's the testing threat to validity, so it's preferable to do the post-test only design. There are other textbooks and researchers that disagree with that. An alternative is to combine those two and do a design called a Solomon 4 design. And here you can see two groups get the treatment, two groups get the pretest, and then you compare. And so you can see if the pretest cause any effect or introduce the testing threat to validity. A Solomon 4 design is probably the strongest true experimental design. The problem with that is variables. And therefore, that's why I would use a true experimental design. Let's talk a little bit more about choosing your design. Here's a list of questions that can be helpful in identifying which design you're using for your research. And remember, I said you can use mixed designs. So let's say, for example, one of my independent variables is gender, which I'm not going to manipulate, but one of my independent variables is a treatment that I, as a researcher, am going to manipulate. Obviously, since I'm not manipulating gender, I have a causal comparative design, but if I am manipulating some type of treatment, depending on whether or not I use randomization, I have a quasi-experimental or true experimental design. So just recognize that. You may have multiple designs. So for every variable, specifically independent variables or variables of interest, you need to go through and ask these questions. So let's go through and ask these questions. And I want you to think about your research, and I want you to think about answer yes or no to these. First of all, or answer the question. First of all, are you concerned with relationship or difference between variables? If you're concerned with the relationship between variables, then you have a correlational design. If you're just looking at the relationship between two variables, which most research is more complex than that. If you're looking at the relationship just between two variables, we may need to talk, your design may not be rigorous enough. But if you're just looking at the relationship between two variables, you have a basic correlational design. If you're looking at multiple variables, the relationship of multiple variables to one, or examining a model, you have some type of predictive design. So we've already determined your design if you're looking at relationship. Now, if you're looking at the difference between variables, or are two groups different, you then have some type of group comparison. So the next question you're going to ask is, will I manipulate the independent variable? If your answer is no, it's already occurring within the environment, Then you have a causal comparative design, which is a type of ex post facto design. So you have causal comparative. If your answer to that question is yes, I am going to manipulate the independent variable, then you need to keep asking yourself these questions. The next question you need to ask yourself is, will I use the control group? If your answer to that is no, then you have a pre-experimental design and you need to rethink your design. If your answer to that is yes, that means you have some type of quasi or true experimental design. So the next question you're going to ask yourself is, will you randomly assign your participants? So will you gather volunteer participants and randomly assign them? If you are randomly assigning them, then you have probably some type of true experimental design. If you're not randomly assigning them, then you're going to have a pre-test and you have some type of quasi-experimental design. So I want you to walk through for each of your questions or each of your ideas, and I want you to identify what design you are choosing. You then need to ask yourself, is your design feasible? And is it the best design, the strongest design that you can do? And does it have enough controls for internal validity? I also want you to ask yourself, what other research has been done in this area? And is the design that I'm choosing warranted based on what's already been done? Now, there's two ways to think about this. Maybe a lot of the research in the area that you're looking at has been correlational and causal comparative. And so you're going to do an experimental design. That's a great rationale. Is everything to this date has been exploratory. When I did my dissertation, that was the case. Everything's been exploratory, and now we need more rigorous research. Another way to justify it is most of the research in the area that you're doing has been quasi-experimental because it's too impossible and too difficult to do a true experimental in an educational setting. And so you justify saying other research similar research has used this design, and this design is thus warranted. So go through these questions and ask yourself what design, help them guide and identify what design you're doing. Once you have identified the design, you need to ask yourself a few other questions and begin justifying that design. So using the information that we've just gone over, using the information in your research text, as well as the handout I've provided, identify your design and justify that design. Justify that design using the literature in research text as well as empirical literature, as I just explained. The handout that I provided has some examples of identifying and justifying your research design. Here are a few additional examples that you may want to look at. Again, identify what you're examining, what you're doing. Identify the design that you're using, how you're implementing that design, and then justify why you're using that design. Why is it the most appropriate design based both, again, on research texts as well as other research that has been done in the field. So take some time, work through, like I said, work through the handout. There are some great questions at the end of the handout, and write up a section that you could include in a dissertation thesis or your research plan.
Okay, I noticed that we had some technical hiccups here and there. I don't know whether there's any other person like me. I kept on seeing myself logging in and on out. But nevertheless, we are here. Thank you very much for listening and watching this video clip on the choice. How do I choose my research design? As I mentioned earlier, in many cases, we as students, we go and the library and look at different people's work and just pick and say, okay, for me, this is the research design I'm going to follow. And then you go. But I think it's very important that we have knowledge to guide us in choosing the appropriate research design for our study. This morning, I would really be very happy to hear from ourselves, the students. What is your take home this morning from this clip? What has been your experience so far for those of you who have reached chapter 3 of your proposal, and you are now trying to decide which research design should I go for? What has been your experience in there? But really very important, what I would love to hear is, what is your take home today? Is there anything we have learned today? First of all, were we awake? Anyway, sometimes these hours are quite tricky. These hours of the day is when sleep is really on our neck. And so it's possible that you log in and as you that you are you're listening, in the end, you have actually found yourself sleeping. So I just want to open this floor for discussion in the remaining few minutes. We have about 7 minutes. Can I hear from my fellow students? Is there anything we are walking away with this morning, in as far as choosing a research design is concerned? Kindly unmute and share with us anything around research design this morning. Okay. I want to be sure that I'm not alone in this morning. Thank you very much. I'm seeing a hand from Madame Petrolina Alcieno. Please go on.
Thank you so much. What I'm taking home today, I'm taking that area where we have the descriptive research design. Personally, when I was presenting my proposal, I had a lot of questions when it came to this. But today I actually, maybe possibly I had not quite maybe understood it, but today I can say that I have understood it and I'm going to incorporate it. I think by looking at this, my study goes right under cross-sectional design, because at first I had quoted a longitudinal, but then explained my explanation was falling under cross-sectional design. So this one here, and I've actually learned, and this is my take home. This is my take home. Thank you so much. I'm actually at the data collection stage. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you very much. Yes, you are not alone in this. Many times we present our work, and as we are explaining, we are busy explaining something else, and the senior scholars are seeing something else. What you are written is completely out of what you're saying. So you are not alone in this. So it's good that we are able to pick some few things this morning and go back and improve on our work. Thank you very much, Petrolina. Any other person who would want to share something that has been, that he or she has picked this morning? Okay, I'm looking at my chat here to be sure that we are together in this class. This morning hours are tricky. Okay.
Yes, Joseph.
Yes, please go on. Good. You are on. Go on.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Joseph, for another video here. It's always really very helpful to always remind, even when you have moved on, you just know what you're writing or putting down. But for me, the clearer part that has come in is on the correlational research designs, which we possibly are always most times working with. So the guide here is, you don't know the direction of what you're looking at or what you're examining, but fundamentally, for as long as your study is a relationship, including predictive assessment of what you are doing, then you are doing a correlational research design. I think that's what I just wanted to share for now.
Thank you very much, Bernard. I totally agree with your submission on that. We have 2 minutes, and if I could get one more student reacting to this, that would be very good, before we bring the session to an end. Okay. James Mubangisi, you've been silent. Is there anything you can share with us this morning?
Yes, good morning, Joseph Erasu, and good morning, professors and doctors and my fellow students. I don't have much to say this morning, only that I want to thank you for the video, and I want to thank you for the choice of the video also, where we are talking about the research design. Of course, you know how we have been moving together and how we are moving together on this journey of this PhD journey, and how there is the proposal is giving us headache, especially the part of the methodology and on writing the research design and research approach, then research paradigm. I mean philosophical paradigm, but this video makes the idea of the research design very clear, and I wanted to thank you. That's what I can say only.
Thank you very much, James. Indeed, we are not alone. I know very many students who have logged in this morning share the same fate with us. Things are hard, but we become harder so that we can move on. Ladies and gentlemen, away from learning all these things, away from knowing what to do in this journey, there is also the other part which is not commonly talked about, and that is the politics of the PhD journey. This morning, ladies and gentlemen, allow me bring this to a close, and at the same time, take this mic to Dr. Ahmad to take us through in that very important session. Doctor, I don't know whether you're on. In case you are on, kindly take this mic and drive us through the next session.
Thank you very much. My colleague Elasu, Joseph, I'm sorry my voice is not good, and I'll be working with Dr. Michael Koche as a result. You're welcome to our second session, Sunday, July 26th. We appreciate your commitment to the sessions and also being part of us every Sunday. And also we appreciate your work. Allow me first of all appreciate the senior colleagues who are on this platform who are joining in time. First of all, our senior mentor, Professor Joseph Fontai, thank you very much for being with us. Also, Professor James Kagari, you are always with us every Sunday. Dr. Michael Koche, my colleague, whom we moderate these sessions every Sunday. Dr. Collins Agabalinda, thank you. You have been lost a while, but you're back. Thank you, Dr. Collins, for being with us today. Dr. Gret Cheune, Dr. Nkurunziza Gideon, our own Professor Rola Orobia, Professor Vincent Bajire, our main speaker today, and many others. Sorry. This morning, we are going to really discuss about the PhD politics. The PhD politics. It's kind of interesting that in most cases, politics will be everywhere. To our students, it is very, very important to note this is a very important topic for you. As you proceed in the PhD journey, it is key that you ensure that you pick out a few things here and there. And our main speaker is Professor Vincent Bajire, and our keynote speaker is Professor Joseph Mutai. Allow me begin with Professor Vincent Bajire. Professor Bajire is an associate professor at Makerere University Business School, the Dean Faculty of Graduate Studies. And Professor Bajire has worked a lot in research. His experience is over a period of 25 years at Makerere University Business School, and he has been handling research issues. He has a PhD from the University of Nairobi, but again, he's a member of so many associations, including the American Academy of Management, which I think is one of the top publishing houses we have. So Professor Bajire is key in this area, and we invited him to share with us these issues because of his knowledge in the area of managing research at that level. Of course, handling PhD work in Bugolobi gives him an upper hand in discussing politics at a PhD level. Also, our keynote speaker is known, Professor Joseph Mutai, whose experience goes to beyond 30 years in the area of publications. You know very well that Professor Mutai has over 155 publications. He should be now going to 170. That record is just a few months ago. So we may need to really count again and see how many publications he has so far, which is not a very simple journey not a very simple achievement. This is for Professor Bajire. Professor Bajire, this session has been here for the last coming to 3 years, every Sunday, unless when there is a very, very special issue that we may not meet, like when we lost our own person, your friend, Dr. Jolie, who was a member here. That is the only reason why we may not meet. But it's a session that we have every Sunday. It has students from all over the world and professors across the globe. They may not be attending every Sunday, but we have them regularly. So allow me to welcome our students from the universities in Uganda. Welcome. Students from universities in East Africa, Kenya, and Tanzania. Those from South African universities, especially Zimbabwe. They are very common participants here. And also from North Africa, Egypt, and West Africa, Nigeria. We have so many of those on the platform. And those from Asia and other continents, we welcome them. So Professor Bajire, this platform, as I introduced you, it is not only for one institution, but it's a kind of a global platform trying to support PhD students and also help in knowledge sharing and growth. We appreciate you for your acceptance to being with us this morning. We believe that what you're going to share is important for the growth and success of the PhD students. Allow me begin with our keynote speaker, invite our own main chief mentor, Professor Joseph Mutai, to share with us on the subject matter of PhD politics. Then after, we shall invite you to give us the main presentation. Professor Mutai, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed Walgembe. for giving us this opportunity to speak. And I want to welcome everyone present this morning, and also thank senior colleagues who are present and who have been supporting PhD students for a very long time. I must say that your efforts are not in vain. In a special way, I welcome my senior colleague, Professor Vincent Bajire. As Ahmad has indicated, he is really an experienced researcher, and he has supervised many PhDs. And him being the current Dean, Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research at Makerere University Business School, and having been in that position as Associate Dean before, he has lots of experience. In fact, the first time I listened to Vincent talking about the politics, I learned so many things that I'd never actually thought about. So although I'm the keynote speaker, I cannot claim authority and knowledge over this aspect of navigating through the politics of a PhD journey. My colleague Vincent is way above me, and I salute you, and I've listened to you, and I appreciate, and I think this is an opportunity that students who are undergoing this PhD training should not lose. Politics of a PhD certainly is real. It does exist, and is going to describe the nitty-gritty of the politics. But as a way of providing a foundation to what he's going to talk about, without really going into the politics of a PhD, I know that one of the most frequent laments of the PhD student is, why did someone tell me this or that earlier, especially when they find themselves in certain situations that are a little bit tricky and difficult to navigate through as they pursue their PhDs. Such questions linger in their minds, and they even talk to their colleagues about it. And you know that there are actually innumerable things, right, which nobody bothered to tell you as a PhD student, which, if they had talked to you, would have saved you from large amounts of confusion, could have saved you from wasted effort, could have saved you from genuine tears and misery if you had been told earlier, could have saved you from depression. I know that some people actually, when they are pursuing their PhDs, they actually go through this aspect of depression. Personally, I have known a number of students going through this, and I've counseled a few of them who have gone through these situations. And we see that some of the things that they actually talk about relate to the politics of the PhD that they did not even think about, that they have never actually imagined. So we see that today's discussion, which is going to be led by Professor Vincent Bajire, focuses on the important things that you will not find in the standard textbooks, right? The standard textbooks don't bother to mention these things on the assumption that they can be left to the students and supervisors. And yet we know that when you decide to do a PhD, the core concept of the PhD is very simple. It is demonstration that you have the skills to conduct research independently. And the process is equally simple in concept, right? You do a body of research that acts as a showcase for your research knowledge and skills. You write it up. You then have a critical discussion about it. And that's what comes up at the end of the PhD product. And that is really the viva voce examination. So you have this critical discussion at the viva voce with the professional researchers who decide whether you should be awarded a PhD or not. And sometimes students fail to get their PhDs at this level because they do not manage the politics right from the time they join the university. Now, the concept here is simple, But students find it daunting because it is not specified, right? And it is not really structured the way it is done at the lower degrees, at the masters, at the bachelors. Students enter class, right? You do coursework, you sit exams. At the end of the day, they tell you you've got a CGPA of this, you passed your paper or you haven't. And at a PhD, nobody is going to do that. It's really your journey as a student to understand, right, what research is all about, because the major objective is for you to become an independent researcher. Right, so this PhD relies on the student bringing intelligence and intellectual discipline, right, that you must go through in the discovery of knowledge. And of course, at this stage, you can see that the goal of this PhD is usually open-ended and not easily quantified, because so much rests on the final assessment. So if you don't manage the process very well, and you only want to surprise people with a thesis that you are going to submit, you'll have a problem, especially if you don't want to work with the people whom you've been given to support you, your doctoral committee members, your supervisors. If you don't, and remember, these are the people who will say, because they have been put in place by the university, right, as a quality control managers, right? And they're the ones who will say that, I think from what we see, the student has reached a stage where we can let him go and have a PhD and join the PhD bench. So as you can see here, right, you need to understand the rigors and the politics and the ropes, right, of the PhD. And my fellow students, right, one of the things that you need to note here is that when you sign on as a prospective PhD student, the whole process is phrased in terms of you're having to make active moves from one stage, which is the starting stage, to another, rather than a default assumption that once you have started a PhD, you will automatically end up being examined for one, right? Because that may not happen and you drop off. So the earliest phase of a PhD is figuring out the ground rules, right? And that's why at this stage, many PhDs, right, programs in various universities, right, will require you to go through an orientation phase, right? And of course, even if there is no formal process in some universities, remember the orientation phase is there, right? You are oriented into a PhD, but that's not the end. You are also oriented to the literature. And that's why over now, I think a period, we've been talking about things like, for example, systematic literature reviews. We've been talking about meta-analytic reviews. We've been talking about state-of-the-art reviews and so many other types, right? So here you get what we call orientation to the literature, because you cannot research and contribute knowledge to a discipline that you don't understand. This business of just picking about 5 journal articles and you read and you think you understand it, and then you go ahead, you start even telling lies that, you know, to the best of my knowledge, no research has been conducted in this area. It's because you don't understand the kind of degree that you want to get at the end of the day. And that's why you get so many problems with the structures in the universities where you have registered. You get problems with the doctoral committee. You get problems with the with your supervisors, and you get problems even with certain other individuals, right, within the university. And that is really an element of politics that my colleague is going to talk about. So you need to figure out, right, ground rules, orientation, the literature, for example. You have to go to what we call expectations and norms, because the university has expectations, you have yours, supervisors have expectations, doctoral committee have expectations. And now when you start even consulting too many people, which is okay, there's no problem with it, and you start getting swamped up into their own ideas and the hatrages of your supervisors or supervisory committee members and so many other people. So you start also joining them, when one supervisor makes one comment, you also move around and start telling other people that this is, by the way, I've got a bad supervisor, I've got a bad doctoral committee members, I better get rid of him and things like that. So I think we are saying you need to figure out, right, orientation, the literature, the expectations and norms. And of course, you need also to go through some bit of training in basic research methods. Unfortunately, many people start working on their PhD, they have not gone through any training. Yes, of course, I know some universities don't provide these kinds of trainings, but it's your responsibility to read because the product requires you to do so. So anyway, these are very important. You need to figure out who makes decisions, right? And you need to come to terms with the system. And here, when we talk about the system, we are talking about the politics, right? We are talking about the procedures. We are talking about the structures of the institutions. And this is very, very important, as my colleague will be discussing these things very well. So pay attention to many of these things that our colleague will be taking us through. If you had never realized them, I think now you will be able to understand what takes place. Please remember that at some point in the process of pursuing your PhD, right, you have to convince your supervisors, you have to convince your doctoral committee members, you have to convince the university. And not only that, you have to convince the scholarly audience because your thesis will be sent out for review. So, and this is a person that you really don't know, right? They may send your thesis to the US, to the UK, to those professors. Now, if they go through your work and they say this is substandard, yes, that is the verdict. So all these are very important, right? The process you go through when you are beginning, like getting to know your topic, getting to know your writing your proposal, making presentations, right? All those things are very important. Remember, my fellow students, right? Many universities require progress reports. And each year during your doctoral studies, in fact, in some universities, these reports are supposed to be written every after 6 months. So you say every after 6 months or each year during your doctoral studies, most institutions require you and your supervisors to submit a report outlining your progress during the year. Right, and of course, assessing your continuing potential for PhD completion and making a recommendation about whether or not to continue your registration. And the process can be more or less formal, but it involves documentation that goes on file. And that's why you must relate very well with the various stakeholders, right, that will, at the end of the day, right, certify that this person is worth getting a PhD. Please remember, my fellow students, knowledge creation, right, learning, and higher education curriculum are typically embedded within a wide range of things like political aspects, existential context, societal, disciplinary, institutional. All these are very important. So the doctorate takes place within the learning domain of the discipline. And this has politics that goes with it, which I'm not going to enumerate. Secondly, remember that the doctorate takes place within the learning domain of the institutional system and infrastructure, right? And here, you as a student, you must become aware of the accepted rules and regulations of your graduate school. Right, this involves a number of things like thesis formats, graphs, length, the publications, right? And of course, if you understand these things very well and you don't start moving around, of course, sometimes I usually say that some people, right, have difficulties keeping quiet about certain things, right? So they open their mouth even when they shouldn't open, as if there is something boiling inside the mouth there, so that they can actually keep their mouth shut. And this happens a lot. So you start saying every rubbish and every nonsense, right, that will put you in a terrible state. Thirdly, remember, the doctorate takes place within the learning domain of the workplace culture, sometimes referred to as the process of enculturation. So this is very important as we navigate through this doctoral journey. Finally, as I end, to give an opportunity to my brother to take us through this thing that I know he knows very well. Remember, the doctorate takes place within the learning domain of the personal and wider society life world. I know of a student who now has almost failed to do her PhD because of failure to understand, right, this personal and wider societal life world, right? So these are things that we need to understand. So the quality of the thesis, the regulations, and the number of things that I've mentioned are very important. So ladies and gentlemen, join me this morning to welcome my colleague, my senior colleague, Vincent Bajire, Professor Vincent Bajire, who is currently the Dean Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research at Makerere University Business School, and is one of the few people, as I said earlier, who I know understand the politics of a PhD very well. I've personally been impressed with his presentations on this, and I've learned a lot. And today we are privileged to have him speak to us. So Vincent, Professor Vincent Bajire, you are welcome, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my senior brother, my senior mentor. Let me confirm that my voice is going through.
We are hearing you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And now, after Prof. Untai has given that kind of trumpet, I may decide to go back and sleep and say, what more do I add at this very morning hour? Nonetheless, dear doctoral aspirants online, PhD students, doctoral candidates, and dear the resource persons, it's my pleasure that I'm with you this morning. I will switch off the video shortly so that we have a stable network, though it is a very morning hour. B. In some universities, if you confuse between a doctoral student and a PhD student and a doctoral candidate, it might earn you a further 1 month's delay for not understanding your stage. In Makerere, we seem to be very silent and well, we take it for people call themselves candidates, students, when they actual aspirants, but we seem not to mind. In others, if you confuse them, you may be sent back to the kindergarten to know which journey you are on. Dear friends, a PhD is gotten through votes in many universities. In Makerere, we actually vote. And once you talk about voting, you're talking about politics. You're talking about decisions and multiple decision parameters. He has presented well, but do you think he's worthy now a PhD? He seems to understand his methodology, but do you think he can contextualize that theory in practice? He has said this, but don't you think he still needs some maturity to represent or to join the doctoral class? I mean, people with PhDs. These are few political elements that you may not avoid along the journey. I will share a few insights here and there, and then where possible, I will give a personal, I'll try to ground it in personal insights on what I saw, what I experienced, and a few interactions I've had with numerous colleagues. Let me just make a quick rejoinder to what has been already mentioned by our own mentor, Prof. Untai. A PhD has various fences, a fence, these things which go around us. There is a fence of deciding to begin, and I address that to what I call the doctoral aspirants who might be on this call. They're deciding to begin. The next one is beginning to be relevant. begin to be relevant. You have stepped in there. You seem to think now you are getting into the PhD. You think you have it. You see it somewhere far, but you are beginning to be relevant to yourself, to others. The third stage is being in there, being inside, in the doctoral journey. The other one, the other phase, is keeping in there. Being there, being inside, and keeping there are different experiences. And then the last one is getting out. Getting out. In my first direct interaction with my professors at the University of Nairobi, one of them said, most of the people who have done the PhD, over 60% of people who have PhDs, including those online here, over 60% at one point contemplated abandoning that journey when they were studying. Over 60% contemplated abandoning the journey and saying, what is this about? And so it gives multiple thoughts. Let me quickly start off by reading for you a small paragraph which I extracted yesterday from my rough notes of what I call my PhD memoirs. The little background is that I had worked with my supervisors and we were about to end the journey, but as required by University of Nairobi, there were 2 resource persons who were to give an eye in my document to prepare it for external examination. So that, you know, as we said, you are balancing the university expectation. The university wouldn't wish to send out a document that will shame them. So they say, okay, the 2 supervisors have done their part. Can 1 or 2 read through? One of them is statistician, and the other one, a bit of a professor of theory who knows about what I was reading. And when they brought the comments, both of them had rejected my hypothesis. One of them had actually sounded rough and asked that I should rephrase them completely, which would require me to go through the entire document again. Another one had not thrown them out, but given a lot of statistical mind into it, which would affect my discussion, my results. So this is what I wrote when I got those comments. 2 resource persons have commented before I submit. As I deeply reject on her comments, one was a male, one was a female professor. The female was the worst one. As I deeply reject on her comments, anxiety arises. First, she has contradicted the second reviewer. And the second, both have contradicted my supervisors. His comments require revising the entire report to align the arguments and discussion. Third, I do not agree with both resource persons on how to restate my hypothesis. I felt the cost for hours without end and looked on spellbound. Dusk grew, and as sand and storm converged on the farm where I was staying, I little could comprehend the way forward. The ship halted and sense eluded me. At first instance, I decided to abandon the work, go to internet, or watch TV, or sleep, or simply board a camper bus and return home. At one point, I wondered of a supervisor who has been and read through my hypothesis for 2 years. I did not significantly commented on them. Now here are 2 resource persons, and in a few days, they blur the light at the end of the tunnel, plunging me down a cliff. Easter lines cast me into darkness. I'm writing from a personal experience where 4 people are now contradicting themselves. They are plunging this little boy from Uganda in the streets of Nairobi into darkness. And after some 3 years of work, this was towards the 3rd year, things seem not to have gotten right. So what has mean deciding in. The question was, how did I decide to get into the doctoral journey? A lot of politics of being able to say, I'm deciding to start the journey, the doctoral journey. My quick personal experience was in 1998, when I was completing the MBA, one of the senior professors here at MOBS said, Vincent, I have looked at you and I think it is good for you to start a PhD right away after your MBA. I said, Prof, you know, that is welcome, but thank you and no. Why? Because I felt it was too early to start a PhD after my master's. At that time, I don't have a family. I've been in class all these years. And now I'm told it's time to start a PhD. I said, no, please, no, thank you. And I rejected his proposal in the MBA class. He felt depressed and it took time to heal. So you look at it and start wondering how I will get finally a PhD. Now, time comes, about 2005, a few of us are selected in MOBS to start having kindergarten classes. The four, about 5 of us, Vincent, I will mention the names because they are all senior people now, Vincent, the late Jole, Janet, Prof. Kawase, and Prof. Nixon. So we agreed amongst ourselves, so to say psychologically, that we are not ready, but we must please the principal and keep attending the sessions of Professor Ahiaus. For those who are from outside, Professor Ahiaus was a visiting professor at MOBS, and his intention was to prepare us for a PhD study. So we agreed almost that let's keep that dealing in there while we see to the point that we can move. Now, Professor Nixon, while we agreed on that, I think for him had been ready. He moves straight ahead and starts. Shortly later, Janet starts. And then the rest of us say, you see the betrayal of colleagues. They were actually interested to start for us who are not ready. That's how the 5 of us, as we know, all of them are now, that was the breaking the fence to start a doctoral journey. And now when you are starting being relevant. You can start getting on top of yourself. Some of the PhD students here may be telling others now, I'm a PhD student, I'm a doctoral candidate. You have started, yes, fine. You want to get on top. You are feeling you're starting to be relevant. You're doing a PhD. Others will say a PhD, so what? Now that so what can come even from senior people. Even if you went to a professor and said, no, I'm studying a PhD, you can easily say, so what? You go to a prison and say, I'm studying a PhD, whatever language you use, you can say, so what? You can start start coming down. And once you are in there, as I mentioned at the start, to get out becomes problematic. Many of us who have gone through that journey, you feel it is hard. I read for you an excerpt from my writings. It was hard inside there. You want to get behind, you want to get out, but you feel it will be diplomatically and systematically a shameful possible to abandon. You want to go ahead, but the road ahead looks rougher, and every step becomes harder here and there. But you are in there. You must keep inside there. In keeping inside, you are dealing with multiple forces. That's the politics we are talking about. The issue of PhD politics is not the politics we talk about on the streets of our constituencies, but it is to do with dealing with multiple forces, multiple players, multiple expectations. And you are at the center as a PhD student, or even the supervisors are at the center of that same confusion. So that's what brings in all these that we are talking about. And in the point of getting out, I'm summarizing the other 5 I talked about first. You complete. How do you welcome yourself to defending your thesis or being in there? and more questions can come at the point of ending than possibly have been there. Let me read for you another small extract I saw in my rough notes yesterday as I prepared for this session. It will be Friday, November 2nd, 2012, Lower Kabete Boardroom. This is Lower Kabete is the business school in Nairobi. Thus pronounced Professor Awosa when I returned a telephone call that I had missed. We shall examine you then. He hangs up. The whistle had been blown and the race was closing to the end. Viva voice awaited me. What does it all mean? Am I ready? Can I ask for extension? What do I need to do? What will happen? What shall I be required to say? Will I answer all the questions? Will my laptop function? Who will be my panelist? Shall I pass? Will they pronounce me a doctor there and then, or I will be told to wait? 4 years of working, now the whistle has been blown. Now I'm plunging myself into these horrible questions. You can imagine at that point, you can think of saying, can I ask them to give me more time? This was 2 weeks notice when I got to this call I'm talking about. 2 weeks notice. As required, I had to be given more about 4 weeks notice, but the supervisor had put me on alert 2 weeks before. He said, when you get another call, it will be 2 weeks too. So assume politically that you have been informed for four weeks. And so should anyone ask you in the system, or you are required to document, you must say you were informed for 1 month, because that is what the policy of the university is. The University of Nairobi being ISO certified, you must give a doctoral student a month's notice to defend. So 2 weeks before all the reports are in, he says, Vincent, be ready. In the coming 2 weeks, you get a call. And then he gives this call, and this call means you should be ready now. It is a month. You must play the politics, be ready, and they shall never claim I wasn't given enough time. Because if you don't do well, students can turn around and say, you know, I wasn't given enough time. You were alerted, and you must keep the politics clean, because the expectations of the process of the supervisors are there, and myself as the doctoral candidate. This is what we are talking about. What does a PhD make of you and me? A PhD disquietens us. As you start it, as you enter the process, as you keep in there, and as you come out. A PhD shortens motivations. It shortens motivations. What do I mean? It makes, if you have motivations of too many things, a PhD seems to say, hello, calm down, be slow. There are too many things, yes. You will get to know everything. You will get to make all the money. You get to do all this, but hold on as you are inside the process. So it shortens those kind of motivation. And the other one is that reminisces, a PhD journey reminisces in each one of us at every stage where you have come from. When you are getting out, a lot of reminiscences of where you have been inside there. When you are contemplating to drop out, where you have just come from. When you are entering, possibly before you have entered. That means it is a psychologically engaging journey to get it and a journey to maintain it. And so, what does it require, especially broadly at the point of starting? Because that's where the politics starts from. The point of starting. To engage in a doctoral journey, you need social readiness. Social readiness. You might be in there, those of you who are in here, the PhD students, the candidates, but some groups of social readiness could be working on you. That is managing relationships. This is 4 a.m. I can see 10 to 5. Some of you are online here, but there are some forces behind saying this thing came for me. Somehow, someone is saying this thing came for me. You haven't gotten it, but that thing is the doctoral journey. At 5 a.m., you're online. You can study. For those who are in the East African time, it is 5 a.m. Get it? Social relationship, which involves family pressure at some times, which involves inertia from friends. Inertia from friends. Some of you can share experiences that you have abandoned and been abandoned by peers because your mind has gone into studying this high-level degree. All those of us who came out, there are some peers who abandoned us because now they think we know too much and they don't want to talk to us. Or for ourselves, you think you know much and you don't talk to them. Or for you, you think you have been made humbler as a PhD holder. You want to talk to them, but they somehow do not give you space to do that. It is very possible. So we have those social disengagement, pressures, and inertia. That's a very critical one that shapes the social readiness, shapes our being into the doctoral journey, in entering, in there, coming out, and being out of it. The other one is economic readiness. Economic readiness. At the time of entry, a PhD, we must understand, is very costly. Yesterday, I got a call from one of our former students at Mbarara campus who has decided to start the PhD and is excited about it, some old man. I said, I want a PhD. And yesterday he calls me saying, do you think I can have engagement with the Makerere so that I will be paying slowly? This COVID thing has disorganized my economy. I told him, I'm not sure you can have an MOU with Makerere. Just sort out yourself out there, and you know you want to start a PhD, you'll pay for it. He says, about how much? I said, to complete it in Makerere, it might require about 60 million. He said, what? Me, I thought these things are easy like MBA. I said, forget it. So we discussed at length. So economic readiness. Some people have the desire, but financially, financing a PhD is not that easy work. Even today at MOBS, for those who are within the MOBS community, financing your desire, financing the desire to start a PhD is different. If I were a cartoonist, I would draw a cartoon of our principal in 2005, when he was chasing several of us with a stick. Go to that class, go to those doctoral classes. You people must start. Yeah, that is how he was doing in 2005. Actually, he wrote for us one time nearly warning letters. He just said, Professor Hiazo I've talked about, just convinced him not to sign them. Otherwise, they would have been on our file. He convinced him, don't sign them. He used to call them washwa. Don't sign those letters. Let me talk to them. So he called us and told us off, said, do you want the principal to sign for you warning letters because you are not starting a PhD? That was the cartoonic minded I'm looking at of the principal in 2005. Now, I'm also looking at him in 2020 when several staff are coming to him to say, I'm ready for the PhD, and the poor man is running away because the institution does not have money. What an irony. We were being chased to start. Now the person who was chasing us can run away from people because the people are ready for the PhD. What has happened to the PhD ecosystem in MOBS? Because of the many forces that are there for people to start. People desire to start, not aware that entering in there is difficult. I'll give a quick instance. In 2008, when I decided finally to start, having gone through those kindergarten rules which we were playing about, and the colleagues having jumped off, this one has started, I also said I should start. Now I walk into the office of the principal, I explain to him, he says, wow, Vincent, it's okay. If you have been admitted in Nairobi, please, we are happy you go. Then I walk past the powers that are with the accounts. So do you think there's no money? We don't think so. You see how you go and start. Possibly, the principal since has nodded, money will come. How do you go to Nairobi without money to go and start a PhD? But the courage was there. I decided I boarded an Akamba and took off, Kamba bus. The other day, for those of you know about Akamba bus between Nairobi and Kampala, I wrote an article called RIP Akamba, Rest in Peace Akamba. It was a very beautiful bus company and I loved them. I used them a lot. But it died and I boarded the last bus between Kampala and Nairobi when I was still a student there. So I boarded on my own. What did it require? To convince family that, you know what, this little money we have, it was going to do this and this. Can I use it to go and start? You never know, moves will pay finally. Either it will be refunded or this thing will be, you know, it will bring some benefits here and there. So you don't need to have rough words to do that. So you must know that. That's the readiness. Many people are having trouble financing PhD because it's a costly degree. And so you must balance forces of funding. The last readiness is the intellectual, the academic readiness. We are excited with a PhD many times. Several of you here are excited. I'm data collection. I'm this one. I'm discussing. Yesterday I was looking at graphs of several of my students here. As I looked through them, I said, this one here is at this stage, but there is a lot to do. And so you may think you are ready, and there you are getting to the top, but academically you are not. I'll give another personal experience. When I was about to complete towards the end, I was invited by the Academy of Management, Africa Academy of Management, to share a paper from extract paper, which could have been one of the first, they are close with the second or third publications from my work. I go to Accra, Ghana. Several of us are from different African countries. We have top professors from Academy of Management. We present, we share, people excited. So when I presented, people commented that this paper is good, you have started a good theory, these strategy things are interesting. One professor is quiet, and yet he had commented on many of the other presenters. I thought I had finally impressed the man who had commented on many. So at break tea, he calls me aside. He asks me, Vincent, have you read Meyer et al. 1993? I said, no. Do I need to read it? He said, I would suggest that you don't read it, but you read the citations of that paper. He said, for ease of your life, I will share it with you. A few hours later, he sent me the paper, Meyer et al. 1993. It was a paper by Academy of Management Symposium. The Academy of Management had set up a specific symposium of top scholars around the world to consider what is called strategic configurations as either theory, a framework, or a topology. And so that symposium came out with very high-level papers. And their summary was that Meyer et al. 1993 published by Academy of Management. So this was a paper, a symposium that had discussed the theory. And in my paper, I'm saying not much has been read or written about these strategic configurations. So I'm priding myself as being on top of one of those who are going to write about it. And the mayor, he was the same person I was talking to. That was Alan Meyer. That was the person I'm talking to, the person who had chaired the panel of Academy of Management to shape the theory that I was priding to use in my study, and I was saying not much has been written. So he advised that I should look at the citations. There were 781 citations of the paper. Dear friends, for 3 months, I abandoned my work, put it aside, and went back to literature review. 3 months. Practically 3 months, I did not look at my topic. I did not look at my results. I did not look at the discussion which I already had. I did not look at the final Bagire model, as we proudly want to call them. I went to literature review for 3 months. trying to read as many of the 781 as possible, as this small life would allow. By the time I plunged out of that, I was different, I was ashamed, I was excited. I had interacted with the propounder of the theory I was using, and here I was in Accra, Ghana, priding that not much has been written about. Yesterday, as I was reading through the work of one of my students here, he had put a sentence that not much has been written about this. I said, are you sure? Have you read? So I'm going to require him to go and read, because he's going to plunge himself into the shame that I had. Dear friends, these are the things we are talking about. How do you do that? How do you go over the academic intellectual readiness? Professor Munene gives us the three-level model: learning how to learn, learning how to read, learning how to write. I'm not going to the details, but those of you who have heard of that, those who have not read about it, it doesn't have notes, but it has practice. Learn how to learn how to read, learning how to write. That is where we are, and that's how you can go. So how do you balance the multiple forces? One of the doctoral students, your colleagues, are a problem to you. As you are handling your PhD, know that your colleagues are a problem to you. They are either poaching you, writing on you, or wondering whether you are right, or wondering whether your work is relevant to yourself and to them. As you are in your cohorts, as you are moving along the way, that is very possible. So as you deal with your colleagues, your PhD colleagues, your doctoral students, someone is asking who is a PhD student and a candidate. We may not go into that now, but beware, that is the first force around you. It is a coercive force. It could be possibly a coping force. And so you must know your doctoral students around you are another issue you must balance. If you seem to move fast, if you tend to be more talkative in your presentations, you seem to be more aware of yours than theirs. Like you have presentations, let's come together, we present to each other, but you seem to be talking about the others and about yours, how yours seems to be shaped. You're already plunging into wrong politics with colleagues, with peers with whom you are in the forest. You are all lost there, but you are getting lost to each other. I've already mentioned the expectation of a university bit. Prof. Funtai talked about the expectation of the university. One of the things that I want to critically bring out, that we deal with many supervisors, with many resource persons who have different backgrounds. If you're a student of Makerere and I'm supervising you, my format, though they are somehow the same, it may not be the same that I bring from wherever I was. And so you might find yourself colliding with the university expectations on simple things like the format. There are some documents I read in the office in Bugorovi at the MOOCs annex, and I say, this one is okay, but Makerere format does not give it this way. You can be plunged into that, and that can cost you some few minutes. You can have a situation where the examiners are sent your document with the format of Makerere, and you reach it there, and the examiner says, this one is not as per the document sent to me, however progressive that could be. So we need to be very careful on that. Especially the other one is about the timelines. Makerere will charge you for delay. Universities charge you for delay. University of Nairobi used to charge you for many things if you have not reached a certain stage of a coursework or a CAT, a continuous assessment, or submitting or discussing this. And many of my colleagues have abandoned the PhD with whom we started the class simply because of the multiple demands on the by the university on the journey. They thought they would take their pace, but they were caught up by these forces. Expectation of funders. People who are funding your PhD think in 2 years or 3 years you must finish. Those who have those scholarships from DAD, from what, their expectations, they have models they have tested, and they know a PhD will finish within the time. And after that, some funders have written to PhD candidates saying, if you delay, you will pay for the extra yourself. You can say, okay, I will mobilize money and pay, but you have lost the face with the funders, people who started you off. Even if you're able to pay yourself later, but you have lost the face. People funded you to finish, and you're saying, I've not finished, and so I can afford money. If you can afford it, why didn't you afford before you started? Why did you look for them to fund you? You should have started on your own so that you plunge yourself into confusion with your money, with your PhD. So that is very important. Several of you here are under scholarships. Please watch the expectation of the funders. I have already mentioned the expectation of the family. It is there. People expect that after PhD, you will be very rich, you will have money, and you look after all the children of your cousins and nephews and whatever. Not aware that after PhD, several of us are so poor that we are trying just to make ends meet. So you must do that. You must prepare for that. Those of you who have just come out, you know that. Those of us who came out know how we manage. That will be for another day. To ask us, how did you manage to come out of this journey poor, but you did not lose your face? Very possible. Then Prof. Ntai intimated that there is another community unknown to you for whom, as a PhD student or candidate, you must work and prepare and balance. This is the community of examiners and reviewers. You might know, you don't know them, certainly, but they are waiting to receive your document by guidance of the university, and they have a lot. And I have mentioned to many PhD candidates. I'm coming to the other one of of supervisors. I'm putting supervisors, politics with supervisors at the end because it is lengthy. But as you work with your supervisors, beware that they are not your examiners. You can want to please them, not aware that when you land into the hands of the examiner, you and your supervisors are in the same dock. Dock or docket, or dock, I think. You're in the same dock. You are under the same test. You will either fail with your supervisors or you don't fail alone. So supervisors are also careful. Our supervisors who are online here, they are also very careful. They are supervising you, but aware that they can be caught into a wrong net with you, especially where we don't read so much of your work and they think you are good, you are going on, and something small is found in there, and they say, how did this pass me? So as you deal with supervisors as your key persons, there are many things. I will not respect all, but you know the politics of supervisors is the worst in handling your PhD journey. You have to play it very well. There is the ordinary balance of expectations. Makere gives the 3 supervisors. At one time, the University of Nairobi reduced to 2 in order to reduce the politics. They said many students were having headache balancing 3 people. So they said, okay, we need 1 on theory, methodology, and 1 on your knowledge domain. 2 are enough. Then later they said, no, 2 are so few, we need a 3rd one to balance these 2. So the politics was brought back. Balancing 3 professors and their colleagues, those of you who are there right now, you know what it takes. It is hard, and you have to balance it right. You can please one, you annoy another. You can write for one, and you forget you are writing for the other ones. The other day I told one of my PhD students, I said, why do you send me emails and you don't copy any of the other ones? But he said, no, it's okay. I have also talked to them. I said, why? You are not answering my question. And they had the rust from me. I said, you must do that. You must do that. So copy them in, so that when I give you a comment online, they know. Or if they give you comments, I'm in the know. Because I must balance myself with them. I don't want to start stepping on colleagues, senior colleagues, because of a small student I'm supervising. I would rather leave you out of my journey than you bring me trouble with colleagues at the senior level. So I told him, please do that, or I quit your doctoral team. Of course, he had to oblige. You didn't want to argue on that. Another student here at MOOCs comes to me and says, you know, you're my supervisor. I said, what are you studying? I'm studying this and this. I said, okay. Okay, you come and talk and see how you move. Who are your other colleagues? Who are the other two supervisors, the X and Y? I said, okay. He goes to each one of us like that and he talks to all of the three. Then he moves on with one and moves and moves. I see him each other time around the campus for a year or two writing. And finally, one morning I reached the desk. His full proposal is there. The last I heard of him directly was that you are my doctoral supervisor. I said, yes, what are you studying? All right, you start and come and we talk. The next round, I see a full proposal on my desk. I talked to my other colleague. He says, I have also seen his document, but I not touch it. I said, I've also already decided not to touch it. All right. That was 2017-18. When I met him in the compound, as I had been meeting him each other time, I said, I saw your document, but I not touch it. Because I don't know what is in it. The last time I saw you was when you were mentioning the topic, you have a full proposal. That was 2018, we went into COVID. I've not seen him again. These are serious things, dear friends, and they are real. And so you pray with supervisors, please balance them. They are simple people. The supervisors, for the information of the PhD students here, supervisors are learning facilitators on the voyage of discovery. Learning facilitators on the voyage of discovery. You are rowing the boat together. So they will not be your examiners, but they are part of you. And so they are very easy to balance, they are very easy to take around, and very easy to enjoy. But the right way dealing with them. Supervisors might be from multiple disciplines, multiple institutions, but you are the student who is bringing us together. We might even have studied together. Some PhD students, we were together at MBA, and I'm now supervising the student. Don't take me for granted. MBA was MBA. Now this is a PhD. I'm now a learning facilitator to you. The other time it was a colleague, a friend, but I'm now a learning facilitator on the voyage of discovery. I'm learning from you. I'm learning from my colleagues. That's what is very intricate and exciting. That when I'm supervising the student with the eggs, I'm learning from the student, building my own knowledge domain, understanding several things. There are many things all of us have learned along this way. And so you are the one to balance the ropes for me to learn. And if you try to fail my learning, then you're a problem. And if you're a problem, then I will be a problem as well. And that is very possible. Balancing supervisors is one thing that can bother you, but very exciting. So please learn how to do that, to understand them, and to see. The first is important to know the methodology. One supervisor might be, superior, send me online, do this online. Like these days, I find myself telling the student, please give me a hard copy. God is good that COVID has reduced. Give me a hard copy. I easily put comments on hard copy than on the soft copy. Some have possibly have looked too much on the screen and they're getting aged. So I say I will put better comments. And possibly I have more time on a hard copy along the way in meetings here and there, where I can easily put comments than to be on the laptop for you. And the student said, but my colleague looks at my work through line. Can I also send you a line? I said, what? Repeat it. Then I closed the phone. I hung up. For you to call me again and start that conversation. In Nairobi with one of my colleagues with whom we are being supervised, we were always joking that you first kneel down and pray that will Professor pick the line? Will he answer rightly? Will he give me appointment? You first kneel down and pray before you make the call. And as the call is through, it's ringing. You say, why did I call? I shouldn't have called Professor. Am I ready to tell him something? You want to cut it off, but dangerous for him to find a missed call or to think you have beeped him. So you are making a call, but you are thinking I should cut it off right now. You wonder why did it go too fast? It should have waited and you end it before you speak. Because, you know, am I ready? Then you do pick and you say, huh? Yes. Then you start from there, the conversation. So these are things that are there, and you may meet them, you may know, and it can be very a bit very difficult. All right. Now let me give you another small extract from my rough memoirs, as I noted on one of the experience on what I'm talking about, those calls with the supervisors where you do something wrong, where you did this and this, and you feel that things are not moving well. All right. This is what I wrote at one time. Past midnight, I rejected the inner self to retire. Quitters never win and winners never quit. This is my PhD. It is a doctoral journey I am on myself, having come all this far. I have read, written, and learned. I looked up the draft given by one of the supervisors. I decided to have a hybrid, to reject my own self-centeredness and the other watertight position of the two supervisors. I rephrased my objectives to reflect my inner convictions with the study, rephrased my hypothesis to align with the two supervisors, not what they want, but what I wanted. I changed the course into the deeper waters. I revoked my horror analysis and decided that the PhD is mine and not for my supervisors. Period. This is Vincent writing at 3 a.m. saying these supervisors are confusing me. They are saying this and this, but the PhD is mine. Let me have a hybrid of what will please both of them. So I wrote a piece that night after writing this paragraph, and the following weeks, each one of them said, yes, Vincent, this is good. You start dancing in front of them. But previously, this one is saying this one, this is saying this one. Now I'm lost. I don't want to please any one of them. I decided that this is my journey. Let me write a hybrid from their confusions and get it right. And I got it right. That is balancing the politics. But if you say, let me please the senior one, the other one will follow. You have it wrong. That Casimiro signature is very important as much as the bigger one is important. And at times we tend to go into that. Dear candidates, we intend to go to that, to think when you please the bigger one, the smaller supervisor, in quotes, will easily agree, no sir, no madam. It can cost you a lot. All right, so that is expectation of supervisors. The other issue to balance in politics is if I can talk until they wake up because they are already home, but let me try to summarize. The politics of having a self-development plan is very important. A self-development plan. On the PhD, I'm not talking about development of the way what you do. Your development plan, how do you think you move from a raw PhD student to a refined PhD candidate ready for Viva? Viva readiness. Working backwards from wherever you are. All of you who are here who are students or candidates have Viva readiness as the last point in your journey, and then start seeing how will you make the doctoral development yourself to get in there. Along with that, please have several personal initiatives to balance the many forces that are calling on you to have a PhD. Reject some, reject social groups, reject pleasing people, reject this and this, and be yourself. But your reject must be very well calculated. Otherwise, you plunge yourself down the cliff as you make your personal choices. You need to have a personal audit continuously. What are your strengths at any point, and what are your weaknesses at every point? You need to know that, and to try to balance it out that. And that requires a lot of self-time. At times we are giving too much time to books, but self-time, time with your supervisors, I don't know. I've not seen. Okay, few I have supervised have done that. Where you go to your supervisor and say, Prof or doctor, whatever you want to mention it, I've just come to have a brief conversation. Not on my work, but a conversation. I'm happy my supervisor in Nairobi, one of them used to do that. You go to him, let me tell you what used to happen. And I have it in an excerpt here, but let me just explain it so that you get it right. I have my document. I've been waiting for Prof's time. I call him as usual, praying first. I go there. I said, come, Vincent, I am in. I reach his office. I have the document. I want him to read my document there, to give a comment on the document. Kampala, how is this one? I used to be examined at Makerere, Faculty of Commerce. We talk for 2 hours. The man has not looked at even a sentence on my work. At the end of it, he says, Vincent, can we meet after 2 weeks? Gosh. Oh no. Oh no. You can imagine, dear friends. You have gone to be given a comment. He has not given it, but has talked for 2 hours. You say, was he idle that day? No, he wasn't idle. That was his nature. And I'm wondering whether I should be doing that with a few people I'm supervising. You come with all that excitement, I put it aside and we talk for 2 hours about how you are doing, what you think, how you are this and this. Then I say, look for me after 2 weeks. You walk out of the place rejected. You'd walk out rejected, but you'd reach down and say, well, that's it. That's the journey. I thought now alongside that, let me give you another experience I had with him. One of them. We talk and then he doesn't look after my work. He finally gives me many comments. Since I was in Nairobi, half of the time I worked, I burned the night candle, as we call it. In about 3-4 days, I'm done with so many comments I've given. I go to him, he says, you are done with these comments in 4 days? I said, yes. Are you sure? He said, okay. Put the document on his desk. And for 4 months, he has not given me back his feedback. Because I was too fast, he said, calm down. Calm down. And you think all these comments I gave time, had given a lot of time, gave me citations, refer to this paper, refer to Wington, this and what. Now for me, I think in the 4 days, I have read the articles he gave me and given comments. Calm down. That was it. During those 4 months of waiting, I boarded the Kamba and returned to Kampala to eat cassava, relax off. But I remembered that I'm not supposed to be here. I boarded and went back and waited from there while I was reading more and writing. Very much experiences, dear friends. Now, the PhD politics of writing, I wrote that, but I want to go more into what they call the gatekeepers, the administrators. There is politics with the gatekeepers. They're called gatekeepers, administrators. These people in PhD office, those people in different offices, whom you think are waiting for you to demand their time to do your work, to do this and that. I've mentioned many colleagues that I have never, while I have chaired a few doctoral presentations at different levels up to the end, I have never typed minutes of a PhD student, and I don't think I'll do it. It's not my job. Someone who types those minutes, brings a draft, give comments, and it goes back. So those persons in that value chain have a lot they do, but at times we take them to be too small. Their work is to work for us to move on with our PhD journeys. You'll plunge into deeper waters. So it is very interesting, but very important to understand the gatekeepers. Okay, we have now open offices, wonderful, with this IT. But in the past, when these things were being brought out, there were people whom you'd go to ask to see the professor, and you have to fill a form from the administrator, from the personal assistant of the professor. We are lucky we don't have those, or we are unfortunate, I don't know. So you have to fill a form, you have to make appointment with him. That person can open the day and say, Prof is not available for the next 3 months. When the man is waiting for you inside there, and for you are told is not available. Why? Because you have played the wrong politics with the gatekeeper. Very dangerous. In the University of Nairobi, I carry, it's another piece of excerpt. I carry my final thesis, you know, the binding was being done inside the University of Nairobi. So I'm carrying these huge books that I have finally bound, and I'm walking down from the library to go to the School of Postgraduate Studies to submit for examination. I reach the main gate of the library. The askari says, please take those things back. They are not allowed to be taken out of the library. I said, these are books I have just bound, and I'm a PhD student. He says, okay, where is the receipt? You know that it can take you another 2 days of looking for the main librarian, to go to the people who bound, to go to this, to go to the School of Business, to get the letter that was saying, okay, ready for binding. That was it. Gatekeeper, the askari, who is told things do not go to the library, and that is job description. And you are there proud, I'm a PhD student, I'm carrying these huge books that should intimidate him. It did not intimidate him at all. He said, go back, take them back. However, I played the politics well, and in a few minutes, he allowed me to move out of the library. Gatekeepers, gatekeepers. Please understand the people who handle your work, from secretaries, administrators, call them, even gatekeepers. Those are the other persons there. Very, very important in your work. The other politics that you need to look at is the politics of publishing. Politics of publishing. It's not easy that you write an article, whatever superior it is, send it to editors and they will accept it. You need to invest, dear friends, those are along the way, and myself and my senior colleagues, we invest a lot in attending conferences in order to meet editors and talk to them, introduce ourselves. And at times we say, I have a paper I'm drafting. Can I have your personal email? He gives you a card in those academic conferences. If you wait, if those of you have scholarships which have some funding for conferences, you are lucky. For those who don't have that element, you may have to invest personally to attending these conferences. For the staff who moves here, if you wait moves to invest in you to go for those conferences, the cows will return home and go back before you have had that opportunity. Invest yourself in some conferences where you can afford it. At African level, you may not go to these international ones in Canada, in Quebec, whatever, because of the cost of flights, but you need to get out. And that is what Professor Ntai says, the issue of entering a scholarly community. You are going to get a PhD. It is a universal degree, but are you ready to be accepted into a scholarly community? Many people have PhDs and they are not members of scholarly communities. They are local. You have your PhD and you remain local. And I don't want you to remain local as your PhD. You have a PhD, but it is as local as yourself. You must have play the politics of publishers, of editors, of people in scholarly communities. You must belong. That's what it will make the PhD out of you. That's what it will be. And that's how the PhD learning journey that you have started becomes part of it. Otherwise, you remain solo with your PhD, and that can take a toll of you later. So please play the politics of knowing editors, talking to editors. We are unlucky that you don't have many local journals that are of repute where you could meet the editors and talk to them, but there are several of them. Several of them. So please do that and start having yourself enter there and balance yourself in there. Now, talking about publishing, I want to relate this with supervisors, the politics with supervisors. We have one senior professor at the Academy of Management, actually the current chair of the African Academy of Management. He has a short bad experience that was about to bring him down. He has finished his PhD, they are examining him at the time of being examined, and he gets his work. He extracts a very good paper. It is accepted by a top journal. He forgets to put the name of one of his supervisors on that article that is publishing. It is accepted. The supervisor says, you have not put my name. And this is extracted directly from the work I have supervised with you for all these years. Okay. He was delayed for 1 year, still pleading and begging the signature of that person. And I think he even wrote to the journal, rejecting that he was part of, indicating he was part of that work, and he was not included. And the article, the journal dropped the article, the manuscript. The candidate lost the time, he lost the repute. Here he is battling with an American professor whom he had left out of work. So how do you engage in publishing with your supervisors, keeping them? And as I said, the politics of exit. At what point do you exit to say, now I'm my own, from my thesis I can publish myself without my supervisors? Many of us have that problem. At what point do you abandon your supervisors after you have completed? And so you are your own, and you start publishing or doing whatever without mentioning your supervisor. You can find yourself too much attached to them that your name will never come out. You find yourself not attached to them, that you are in that bad politics. So you need to look at that publishing politics. It is a lot. Publishing has a lot of politics, which we cannot go into the nitty-gritty here, but be aware of it and prepare. One of the things I mentioned is trying to join scholarly communities and being part of them, interacting with these people and understanding them. And so your role in the whole of this politics is to let passion be the driving force. Let your passion be a driving force. You should have willingness to learn. If you're a student, if you're a PhD, even professors, we have willingness to learn. We have always mindset and attitude change. You cannot think of it that I'm there, I've gotten the top. No, attitude and mindset change. And importantly, not try to learn everything. Not try to learn everything. It's not. And trying to belong everywhere. No, but to be able to have the passion that is driving us and that is there. Remember, for those who are still pursuing the PhD is mine. I'm putting that in quotes. The PhD is mine. Please have it. Saying the PhD is mine. And so what does that require? Focus, know your priorities. Hard work and motivation. Do not procrastinate. Do not procrastinate. I'll do it. No, do not procrastinate. Make a work-life balance, a work-life study balance. If you are studying, balance. If you are working, balance. And take initiatives. I have already mentioned that. And we need to acquire requisite skills. I would talk a lot about that because it was a bad experience for me. On the requisite skills in statistics. Of course, we had classes of statistics. A lot of them with all those professors of statistics. I did my classwork, passed it very well and whatever. But at every moment of data analysis, of writing, I found myself almost empty on some things. At one time, it took me almost the whole night trying to crack something small. I Googled professors of statistics. I Googled these books of statistics. I Googled here and there. I wrote to one of the colleagues in Makere who had taken me through statistics, and I couldn't crack it. I asked Madam Google, but somehow in the morning towards 5, something small of a click, Madam Google says, this is it. And I said, wow, I got it right. Then after that, it was a continuous way of learning. especially statistics. For others, it might be theory. For others, it might be different. My experience was mainly on statistics, in statistical analysis. And every time today, a student presents, I learn a lot in statistics. I get to know. You know the background of this thinking mathematics dropped at S1 is, I mean, S3. I'm happy I have finished mathematics. I will not do it anywhere. The thing caught up with me. And I had to develop a love life with statistics. So please, let's not have complacency in the domains of knowledge that we are. You can be caught in that politics if you cannot explain something small to your mind, to yourself. And that can be a pitfall in that journey that we are talking about. So let's take initiatives, look for requisite skills at any level, requisite skills. It would be a shame now if a student walked to a professor and said, Professor, I'm hard up on this. What does it mean when the statistical, they have some, you say, no, that one you see, you know, you understand. If you are telling a student that, even if you are senior, you have lost it. So we must be continuously learning. And of course, to build confidence and to have a thin skin. To have a PhD, you need a thin skin, so to say, whatever that means. And we must understand the different politics and be able to balance it. As I said at the start, a PhD, it is said generally, is a political degree. But forget about that phrase, which is real, it's a political degree, but a PhD is gotten by voting in most of the universities. As Prof. Fontai said, for an undergraduate, you walk in there, you study, they give you a certain CGPA, and the next you are on the graduation list. It's not like that for PhD. It is you, the candidate, in your thing, with your thing, and amongst your thing. Now, as I come towards the end, Ahmad, I must come to the end shortly. Kobonyo, 1988, expressed the process of producing a PhD thesis to the analogy of an expecting mother. Time comes when contraction will begin. Conversely, this brings along contradictions. A PhD is a contradicting, contrasting, and contracting process. To produce a PhD thesis, that document there is a contradicting, contrasting, and contracting process. The end must be reached, but the steps toward the desired and equally detested end are harder by the day. But once the journey was started, the input made over immeasurable years, sacrifices, the only way is always going ahead. And that going ahead involves understanding the politics of reading, the politics of writing, the politics of administrators, the politics of colleagues, the politics of supervisors, the politics of institutions, and being ready to develop a learning capability. Let me read for you one or two more excerpts, and we can discuss a few of the things that I have put on table. All right, the shifting end. This is another small excerpt from my writings. The shifting end. Hours ahead bring me to sunset and sunrise, finding me seated. I cooled off and with gratitude felt I had done a good job. I submit to the supervisors, knowing the next version is for the awaited signature. 2 days after I crossed a wrong path with one of the professors, who did not even wish to give me a minute, he banged the door on me. I had quietly walked out of his office. Today, I gathered energy to call him. He sounded a little relaxed and proposed we meet again on Tuesday, 5 days later than when I expected, not only an hour with him, but only a signature immediately. He tells me we meet on Tuesday, 5 days later. When I thought he's going to sign that day, and was wondering whether I had forgotten his signature at home. I was depressed a little, but knew days will open and close, and they said Tuesday shall definitely come. You hear that, courage, dear friends? Telling me let's meet 2 weeks. It's okay, the 2 weeks will end. So I said, definitely that Tuesday will come. The signature will be with you if you don't have it that day. Dusk and dawn will follow each other right from that day. I accepted that the journey cannot be shorter. It must take its pace to a mature end. That's it. At times we want to finish quickly. We think we can move along. It has its own maturity cycle. You read about the ecosystem theory, look about institutional theory. Those theories we talk about, stakeholder theory, Simanyi what, resource-based, all these theories we talk about. They plunge into this. They explain this practice that PhD is not rushed, is not what. You must come down, go up, come down, go up, and those days. This is what I added. I was told 5 days because someone who seems not to have his signature that day. When he had said bring for signing, he's telling me 5 days later. Short days on, before the hated Tuesday. I'm using the word hated Tuesday because I hated that Tuesday. Come on Tuesday, 5 days later, before the hated Tuesday, it is past 3 p.m. My phone rang, and online was the professor. He had signed my work, and I advised I pick it right away from his secretary. The waiting was over, the psychological test was over, and the end had closed in. You hear that, friends? He told me 5 days later, he banged the door on me. I walked out of his office, dejected, did not quarrel, did not look back to look at him badly. I walked down the stairs knowing that Tuesday will come, though I hated it. Just 2 days later, he calls me. I see his call. I say, what is now Professor calling? He says, I have sent your work. Vincent, where are you? Come and pick it right now from my secretary. She's waiting for you. Can you imagine? If I had gotten annoyed as I had one of those minutes I read for you, I would have boarded my beautiful Akamba back to Kampala. To say 5 days, let me go home to eat my cassava and be a happy person and forget this. But I kept around there. And 2 days later, he's calling me. He's saying, come and pick it till 3 p.m. The secretary is waiting for you. And you know the way you go to that secretary? You go proudly that I have come to pick the work from Professor. He has signed my work. You can be told, come tomorrow. I've locked it somewhere and the key has oh dear, you have to go with another politics to that gatekeeper. You go there proudly, she can keep you another day. She can keep you until the hated Tuesday. So that is how, dear friends, the end was coming closer. As I was coming towards that closer, I wrote the following to Janet and Jole and Kawase and Nixon, with whom we are, and Katongole Celestine, who were on the same journey. I always joke with him. I tell him, Professor Hiazu is looking for you. Right now, even if I met him today, I would tell him that Celestine Katongole, those who are in MOBS know him. We were together and we were given a paper. Professor, the principal said, give them a paper. Whoever passes that paper must start the PhD tomorrow. And whoever does not pass it must go back to your class full. So we were given a paper. And I failed to get possibly the pass mark, whatever Professor Hiazu was giving us. So he said, I'm disappointed, Vincent. You have not pleased me. Come and meet me tomorrow. I'm going to give you an oral version. I went back to him, ready to please him so that I start finally. He asked me, Vincent, what is triangulation? I said, Prof, triangulation, you know, like a triangle, there are 3 ends. He said, stop there, I'm disappointed. He looked at me for 1 hour, dear friends. We were in the principal's office here at MOBS for 1 hour. Professor Hiazu looked at me, may he rest in peace, I looked at him, he said nothing, I said nothing. Why? Because I'd asked me, what is triangulation? And I was starting through the 3 angles of a triangle, P1I, P2 boy. I had brought P2 knowledge to a professor of management, and I was wrong, shattered, ashamed. I don't know what devil was in my mind that day, that I was in P2 thinking of triangles instead of triangulation, the simple thing of triangulation. Because the next thing was going to ask me, is it going to be consequential? Is it going to be whatever those things you people are in? But I started with angles, my goodness. I felt small, bad. And that day I felt I had lost the opportunity to start a PhD. I thought I had failed. And life was coming towards a closer. If you fail at that time, and that is when the principal had insisted we must start, I was dejected. But years later, I'm writing to Janet, to Jole, to Kawase, to Nixon. And this is the Kasimoro headline. Kilos to Canaan. Kilos to Canaan. After traversing the deserted areas, the hills and flooding streams today reached me up the last hill, looking down to the destination. I left them hanging on that. Nixon, remember, had already finished with Kawase, was still struggling with Janet and with Jole. And then days later, I wrote to them the same thing that I read at the beginning, and I will read it again. It will be Friday, November 2nd, 2012, Lower Kabete Boardroom. Thus, Professor Awosa has called me as I returned a telephone call that I missed. We shall examine you then. He hangs up. The whistle had been blown and the race was closing to the end. Viva voce awaited me. What does it all mean? What do I need to do? Shall I answer the questions? What will happen? Shall I be able to answer the required questions? Can I ask for an extension? Will my laptop function? Who will be my panelist? Shall I pass? Will they pronounce me a doctor there and then, or I be told to wait? Dear friends, that is traversing and navigating the doctoral journey and the politics of PhD study. I thank you for the hours and the time for discussion. I thank you, and back to you, panelists, Prof. Ntai, Dr. Aham.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Ahmad asked me to support him. He is not feeling well. And we wish him a quick recovery. But Prof, I must thank you so much. And to me as a person, I really have learned a lot. I also want to appreciate Professor Joseph Ntai. And honestly, listening from you, you can see that your journey is still vivid on you, and also you are busy all the time making sure that people go through their PhD journeys. So I think fellow senior colleagues, I want us to join me together to appreciate Professor Vincent Bagire, and also PhD students, I want us to appreciate Professor for the time he has given us and the great insights he has given us. Maybe before I go forward, let me first ask Professor Joseph Ntai to come in, and then Professor Joseph.
Thank you very much, Dr. Michael Okoche, and Professor Vincent. Thank you very much for the presentation that you just made. And really, I think what you saw, I was just clapping for him, not because I really wanted to say anything. But I think the lessons have been learned. And I think this is time for students actually to ask questions. Abandoning a PhD can really, thoughts of abandoning a PhD can come in at any given time. I think all of us, or most of us, if we are very honest with ourselves, at one moment we went through that contemplation. The reasons that Vincent may have given may not be the same as probably mine at that stage, but thoughts ran through my mind. And I saw Professor Lola also making a comment in the chat room that yes, this happens. I'm sure if you ask others, they will say the same thing. Maybe just to add a small thing before we start discussing, there is a student I know that started her PhD some time back. And now the issue, the politics that came in here came from really family members, right? The husband at some stage thought that the wife was not giving him sufficient time and support for family-related issues. And this was a young family with the 2 children. And this was a foreign student actually studying from here. And the husband decided to divorce her and marry another person. When that happened, she went through torture, went through hell. At the same time, she experienced difficulties and challenges at the workplace. And this was Zimbabwe, right? And I remember one time when I traveled and went to Harare, I had an opportunity to meet her. We had a chat, a discussion about what was going on. And I told her that, of course, I gave her some bit of advice, right? But a number of things had changed. And I encouraged her to continue pushing on. When I came back, I had a discussion with my doctoral committee members. I was among that, I was a member of that committee. And of course, after discussing, we agreed on a mechanism of helping the student. But I'm bringing this issue for students to understand that what Vincent has just taken us through is real. And if you ask any student or any professor or any PhD graduate that completed his or her PhD yesterday, they will tell you what they have gone through. So I think thanks very much, Vincent. And for me, whenever I listen to you, I learn a lot. And I remember a number of things that I went through. Thank you very much. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you so much, Professor. As I was saying, Professor Vincent, really the insights you have given demonstrate really that your journey is still vivid in your mind, like most of us. But also, being at the steering wheel of where most people go through their PhDs, I think the insights you have given are really very critical. I know this is a very topical issue, and most people want to really ask questions and hear, and I really will be able to give the students the opportunity to ask questions. But allow me briefly to acknowledge most of our new colleagues who have joined in. I want to acknowledge Professor Laura. I want to acknowledge Professor James. I want to acknowledge Dr. Ibrahim Senze. I want to acknowledge Dr. Shimoli. I want to acknowledge Dr. Ahmad. I want to acknowledge Dr. Gideon Kunzinza, Dr. Newton Kayongo, Dr. Goret Chone. And I think at this time, let me invite the students to ask questions, and then we get the responses from Professor Vincent Bagire. But Professor, we must thank you. And yes, Christopher, You can unmute your mic.
Thank you very much, Dr. Michael. I really want to appreciate Professor Ntai for the keynote address, and then Professor Wajide for that very elaborate presentation. It's like exactly what even the current students, really, these are the very, very things we are looking at, balancing the presumably low politics of the gatekeeper versus the politics of the publishing. But of course, that shows really that it's really a political degree. I thought it different, but I actually agree from the experience I've got. Professors, what I want to really ask about, or probably my view, is that instead of even focusing on the only probably balancing only the supervisors, I realized that also it's very important to actually keep engaging the whole doctoral committee. Recently, I was sharing with one of the supervisors, and he was telling me that instead of possibly you copying only one or two supervisors, why don't you ensure that the whole doctoral committee is really in a copy? Of course, I had got some certain small challenge. It's not a small challenge, actually, some challenge, because incidentally, one of the doctoral committee members had not fully got what I was actually addressing. So one of the supervisors was indicating that don't only focus on these supervisors, but ensure that all the doctoral committees are fully engaged. That's what I wanted to put forward, maybe to get views across the board. And also, the other thing is that as you continue engaging the supervisors, you may find that, or even other scholars within the community, you may find that you are putting a certain page or a certain chapter in a certain way, but again, when you get advice along with the way, you find there are differences. I think it would be very important. I don't know whether it's only for me. I don't know whether it's also cutting across, but Professor Wajide has mentioned about the format of Makerere format. I think this may not be very well understood by all students. I think it would be a good thing that it is fully shared regularly with the students, so that then there's always a point, a fallback position as you juggle the politics, then you know this is the framework that I'm really working in. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Christopher. Any other comment, any other question? I believe that there are going to be a lot of issues here, and let us bring our experiences, which could be able to, I know Professor will be able to respond to most of them. Okay, any other experience from a senior colleague? I see. Okay. Do we have any other experience? I know sometimes some students may fear to raise their experiences. Maybe they feel that their supervisors will hear, but I know there could be other experiences you feel that.
Hello.
Yes, please. Yes,
Yes.
Julius.
Yes, Professor. Good morning, Dr. Pache. I want to thank Professor Vincent and Ntai for the ideas they have shared with us along this journey. However, I just want to ask, is there a context of like the north to south politics of a PhD? Because the stories like we get is that those who have had their PhDs from maybe Europe, America, or somewhere, the politics seems to be a little bit different than how it is experienced in the South here or in Africa here. Is there something of that context as far as the PhD is concerned? Thank you.
Yes. Maybe I invite Professor to respond to that as we wait for other comments. Professor Vincent.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Michael. Chair, certainly the Prof. Ntai will also come in on some of these things, but briefly, the doctoral committee versus the resource persons and the supervisors. My comment and answer would be yes and no. Whereas one says always copying your doctoral committee members, not all doctoral committee members enjoy that. So you may not take a leaf that has worked for another person and may not possibly fit into your own shoes. The politics with doctoral committees and supervisors, one of them is money. That one you must know. That at the end of the day, structures indicate who gets what. At times in MOOCs here, we are not paid, but supervisors here may not even remember that they've ever been paid for supervising students. But ordinarily in structure administratively, there is the main supervisor and the two supervisors and the doctoral committee. When it comes to remuneration, if it comes at all, the proportion is not the same. And so some doctoral committee members will say, no, you work with your supervisors. They are going to be paid for that. For us, we are supporting, we shall be remunerated, but some allowance which comes later. And so they may not want to be bogged down with your work. And structurally at time T, the student will present to the doctoral committee for a full decision. So now if the decision has been made along the way with all of them giving comments here and there, then the structure and the process interlink and it could cause you confusion at time T. So whereas that supervisor proposes it, as I mentioned in my personal experience, you have to weigh whether to be yourself and decide and know what to do and see how to convince them all of what you are doing. Do not merely say one supervisor has said I should be copying in all the rest and you quickly do it. It may cost you, some may never respond, or may say you are bugging us with your work, we are waiting for you, having gone with your supervisors. Because it's also a checkpoint that you work with the three supervisors, the main supervisor possibly, the other supervisors will say, work with the main supervisor, we are supporting him. The main supervisor, has the main supervisor passed, has he agreed with you, then come to me. Others will say, go to my colleagues, the other two supervisors, when they have agreed with you, then you come to me. So do not take it to be as plain on paper as copying in everyone. It has some implications. Look at it, balance it, study it, consult colleagues and see where it has worked and with whom it has not worked, and then go slow on it and do the right thing. You have to balance that politics. It can be very dangerous. It can cost you a lot if you don't balance those five. In Makerere, the five, the three versus the two. Of course, remember, there are also other resource persons. And I had not emphasized the issue of balancing other resource persons within MOOCs. MOOCs now, plus other universities, we have gained capacity. You are sure among the people, these doctors and professors in your knowledge domain, among them are your reviewers, among them are your examiners. So bringing them into your circle is very important. Go to them and say, this is my work, this is the topic I'm studying, what is your comment? They may not give you so much time or so many comments, but it's very important. Among them, let me tell you, it is possible that I'm in the department A and a colleague there is doing his PhD. I don't know even what he's studying. He's going on with supervisors, they go on. All of a sudden, I get a letter from a career appointing me the examiner. I say, you mean you are studying these things? In my mind, of course. You are studying these things and never asked me, never consulted me, never informed me. So those things are also there. We are human, we are nature driven. So please, as a student, know the people who are in your knowledge domain, by department, by knowledge disciplines and whatever. And alert them, inform them, consult them. You never know, one of them will be the examiners. One of them will be the supervisors. Then the other important thing which I should bring into publishing, it is to do into citation. Many colleagues here in all our universities have published. They have written papers, and the papers have gone into, they may not be in the top journals, but they are in journals which are fairly good. And so you write and quote all the professors and the writers of Mexico, of Thailand, of Ghana, of China. No local study is quoted, cited, of someone who has written in a Ugandan context. Sincerely, you cannot fail to do that. At the University of Nairobi, when we were in this module of PhD politics, we were told that even go to your PhD supervisor's thesis, look at it, see something to cite from there. As said by Bagire 2012, he says this, and I'm your supervisor. In all your document, I'm supervising you, and I don't have even a citation there. Gosh, my goodness, sure all the things I've written are useless, and I'm supervising you, meaning I'm in your domain. So please play these politics. These things are there. They are real. Let me tell you what happened to me. What happened to me, whatever I put it. I was examining a PhD thesis from a student from Zimbabwe. It had been sent to me and had been asked. Somewhere along the reading, I found Bagire 2013 studied the Ugandan context, and he says this and this and this. From that point, everything was right. I read it, enjoying it. I want to assure you, in terms of the literature. He argued, he said, while Bagire in Uganda said this and this, X said this in Mexico. And so there is a difference between the African context and the American context. What an argument. It pleased me to read that. I want to assure you, dear friends, it pleased me. And everything after that was very interesting and good. And I gave it time. You can even postpone a cup of tea to read ahead. But when I read your thing and it has things and things, I read on, I said I will finish tomorrow. I read again, I say, let me give it another time. Do you know why your PhD report spends hours and minutes and months with examiners? Simply because the attraction to read it is not there. So please click something in writing, in academic writing, that clicks. You click something that clicks the reader. And one of them could be citation of someone who's studied locally, who has done a work related to yours, and you are citing him, and he's your examiner, he's your reviewer, and he finds the thing there. So please consult as many. Do not tire. And do not balance the politics. Do not go to all of us. And then you think what we have given you seems to overtake what your supervisors are doing. Your supervisors are technically your signature people. You have to balance it. You say, whereas we are saying this and this, but my supervisors want it this way. But if you start jumping on so many people, we have had those cases in the MOBs here, where someone says you are being confused. You don't have to be confused. You have to be careful. You come to us, consult, pick a few of our ideas, either take them or leave it, but at least you have balanced some politics locally. The issue of the format, my dear friend, if you say JRC, the Faculty of Graduate Studies, should regularly send us to us. You will wait for our regularity and you will not sit. Professor Antai said at the start, you are the PhD student, look for this information, seek it, look for it, seek it, look for it, seek it. But if you say they should regularly send it to us Makere format, you will not get it regularly and you'll be caught in your own web. All right? The polarity of West versus local, Prof. Antai is our senior in this, can give a comment.
Thank you so much, Prof. Just like I said, somebody has just sent me a direct comment and requested that I don't read his or her name. And the question is like this: why would a doctor who has gone through the same hassle just play hard to get? There are some supervisors who overdo it. I request all the supervisors in the platform try to be nice to students. Thank you. So I think Professor Joseph Ntai.
Can I comment on that? Senior coming is okay. I not comment on that.
Please go on.
Okay.
Professor, I was just laughing at that comment coming, please.
Okay. I thank you, Michael, and thank you, Professor, for the responses you provided. I'll just come in a little bit and take just a few seconds responding to one, the context-specific politics. In every university you go to and you enroll on a PhD, you need to understand the politics. There is no institution that doesn't have these institutional politics. So they are there, just have to understand them so that you navigate them, you navigate through them quite easily. Let me just give you an experience since you are talking about the north-south aspect here. We were co-supervising a student. My colleague was from USA. I will not really mention his name. That gentleman, myself, and another colleague were supervising a student. Now, this is how the other supervisor perceived the whole exercise. He is a professor. I am a professor. And my other colleague is a professor. We are three professors supervising a student. Now, this professor thought that he was very superior because he comes from the USA and he's on the editorial board of one of the journals, Class A journal. He forgets that I am also at that level. I am also on the editorial boards of about 5 journals. And these journals are not really bad journals, right? They're also Class A journals. So this gentleman would review the work of a student, right? And would send comments to the student and he copies us in, which was very good, and would do that regularly. But whenever he would send comments, he expected me to respond to his comments, and he thought I would provide a write-up responding to his comments, right? In other words, the assumption was that I was also being supervised. I was a student, so I didn't, right? But I would not, and I would look at what the student was doing, and my colleague would also do the same thing. So at some stage, there was actually a conflict that came in because me, I was not being supervised. I'm not a student doing a PhD. So when this clash came, there was a meeting that was called by the funder. The funder is also a big funder in USA, right? So we had to tell the student when we had that meeting. Of course, the funder raised those issues. We were very clear, me and my colleague, that we are not being supervised in this process. So the funder, we advised the funder to get other supervisors and that we are getting off the supervision process. And the other gentleman was also in the meeting. Of course, he said, no, I'm going to change my style of doing things, right? So eventually what happened was that he went back because that is his model of doing things. I slipped back. So we had to call a student and tell the student that there are two options. A, we are pulling out so that she retains the other supervisor up to completion. B, we told the student that, well, the ball is in her court, so she should make a decision. But of course, eventually, she decided to abandon the scholarship. She had to abandon the other supervisor because she was also fed up. I think she's on course. She's about to complete her PhD studies. So I tell you that these things are everywhere. I'll give you another experience. We had 6 PhD students in Holland, and 4 of them completed and got their PhDs. 2 of them failed. Why did they fail? It was very simple. Politics. You do it the Uganda way. You are in Holland. For them, everything, you must make an appointment. You must say, Professor, once he tells you that you see me after 3 months, it is 3 months. If it is 6 months, it's 6 months. You cannot move around. At least in Uganda here, you can go and consult Vincent, even if he's not your supervisor. You can go and consult another person somewhere. Not in Europe or USA or Holland. It is not as easy as that. You must pay them, right, if you have to go there. But even then, the fellow will tell you, no, I cannot touch your thesis because you are not my student. There will be a conflict between me and my colleagues because they know each other, by the way, in every discipline. So they will not touch it. And those are the fellows who examine you eventually. So you just have to understand this. It is everywhere. Understand the context where you are, and please make sure that you go through the politics and navigate. I think that's all I can say, Michael. Over to you.
Thank you so much. And I think there is a message from Dina said, thank you. This week has been very tough for me, feeling very confused and asking myself if really I need to continue in this PhD journey. Listening to professors gives me. So I think you can see that Professor Vincent and Professor Joseph, that these lectures have been very insightful. I think we're coming towards the end of our time, but
Michael,
maybe,
may I comment? May I comment on the person who raised the issue of why supervisors, if they have gone through it, why do they let you move smoothly? Why didn't you let us as PhD students move smoothly if they had gone, if they went through it? 2 brief comments. One is just sarcastic. The sarcastic question, why should that end with me? Why should this experience end with me? That's sarcastic. But 2, a short analogy. A young man was watching flowers and he saw a struggle within the flower. They were shaking. And after shaking, he saw the chrysalis, that kind of cocoon which produces the moth. He saw it bursting open. And there came a small head, then a small a wing, then a leg, and something was struggling to come out. And finally it came out, stood for some time on the top of the chrysalis, and then it started trying to fly, it failed, it tried to fly, it failed. Then finally it jumped on another flower, on another, and into the air, a beautiful butterfly flew. Then as he walked into the same flower garden, he saw many shakings of chrysalises where the butterflies were trying to come out. The young man committed that this struggle must end. Why should they struggle to come out? He got a very thin, very sharp piece of metal, and started opening these chrysalis so that these moths come out smoothly without struggling. The first one he did, it opened, the moth came out, it did not fly, it fell on the ground, and so it died. Went to another paper, another one. He said this one had struggled too much, that's why it has died. He went to another one, tried to open. But for all those he opened for, the moths, the butterflies never flew into the beautiful air, period. Thank you.
Let me add something to just respond to the question. I remember when Vincent was presenting, he made a comment, and he said that his professor asked, especially after making a comment, I think this was at the Academy of Management where he was making a presentation, that professor who kept quiet, remember, Vincent had actually completed his PhD, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And he had made a statement, he made a statement that to him, he doesn't seem to see many scholarly works in that particular area where they're proposing a theory or some kind of model. And this professor who kept quiet gave him a paper that had over 100 references. And Vincent went and read and discovered how much had been done in that area. Every PhD step, right, is filled with a lot of learning, right? There are certain ideas that we have in our minds, which we must unlearn. So in other words, unlearn, learn, and relearn. But because human beings always want shortcuts, we don't think about these things. So when you take the work to the professor, right, and that's why we're talking about the politics at that stage. A professor tells you lightly, because he's your friend at that stage, and he's smiling and tells you, by the way, it will be quite useful for you to start with a systematic review, literature, paper, so that you understand the area and we go on. Now, because for you want to take a shortcut, you actually go and pick 6 papers, 10 papers, and write your introduction and continue moving on. But you purport that in your introduction, right, you have identified a gap that you have written down, but the professor does not see any value in that. You ignore him, you continue working up the time when you even want to go to the field and collect it. So when you are brought back to your point, right, when you're brought back to your right senses, then you start saying the professors don't want me to proceed. Let me tell you, there is no farmer that will ever roast his seeds before taking them to the garden and plant them. It doesn't happen that way. Every professor is interested in his PhD student completing, but he doesn't want you to complete when you are raw, right? There are a number of things you must learn. Some of these are academic and there's politics to navigate. Others are administrative. You have politics to navigate. Others are social, right? Even outside the university, by the way, that you must navigate. Just understand this thing called PhD that you have registered. It has certain things that you must follow. I submit, Michael. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. Like I was saying that we are almost wrapping up. And I think as we wrap up, I'm going to give you the 2 people who have raised up their hands a chance to speak. But after they have spoken, I will ask Professor Joseph Ntai to make a brief closing thoughts, and then Professor Vincent. And then after that, then we shall have Professor Laura close. Then now we have a prayer from Dr. Goretti. But quickly, Abby Kalensi, and then Dr. Gideon.
Thank you, Doctor. And I want to appreciate our mentors, Professor Ntai and the rest. As Professor Wajiro was presenting and Professor Ntai were making comments, my little experience in my academia has revealed to me this, that at a PhD level, a PhD is a point whereby people must contribute to community. And to contribute to community, you must have a thorough analysis of events. I'm in academia, I'm a lecturer. And the one thing I've come to know is that by the time you are crowned a doctor, you've got a doctorate, you must have been found a master in a certain field whereby you can help the society, the nation, solve problems. So becoming a doctor, to me, it's not a simple thing. You must have seen somebody who is worthy to contribute to national problems, global problems, local problems. Now, at that level, you must have gone through a sieve. The few interactions I've made with some of the professors on this platform and also the doctors, one of my academic mentors is Dr. Musenze is here, is that I've found them not bad people. Even Professor Antai, I've ever interacted with him so many years back, but I've found them parents. Everyone has got his own principles, but the moment you understand what somebody wants, there is nothing impossible. That's a lesson I've learned in my academic life. And as Professor Antaya has said, that if someone has to roast the nuts before they may be taken. And as supervisors at the doctoral committee, they don't want you as their PhD student to ashame them when you reach there to defend. So I want to appeal to fellow colleagues on this platform who are on the journey that let us just study our mentors, our supervisors, just to know them. In spiritual realm, we talk about spiritual fathers. And for spiritual father, you must be submissive as a spiritual son. So I see our PhD supervisors and mentors as spiritual fathers, and what they need from us is submission, because it also holds a name for them. Thank you, Prof. Thank you, our mentors.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gideon.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, our senior mentors, Professor Ntai and Professor Bagire, for this good presentation that is preparing us to reach where I want to reach. I would like to add on building trust in a PhD journey. For me, I take it as one of the mentoring program. I see a number of us would want to voyage through and complete, but I think it's not about completing. There's a lot to learn. One of the things that I learned is about time management. Even up to now, I'm sure some people wonder, what do these people do waking up at 3 up to 6? We have a culture orientation that is taking us backward. And I think, as Professor said, and learning is very important, especially for those who are starting a PhD journey. You have to plan for your time, balancing the time for the family. The family has a lot of expectation. There's maybe burial. There are other issues, the needs and wants. How are you balancing their time? Then the other things, the workplace. You have started a PhD journey, but the question is it going to take the time for the work? If you lose the work, you still have to continue. The other aspect is about the partner you have. You are married. What time do you give to your partner? Are you going to complete PhD when you still have a partner? Is a PhD source of happiness or source of stress? How are you planning your time? Your health, I think, is important also. How do you plan the time for your health? Is the time more about reading, or you need to plan your time when also to do some bit of refreshment to your health? I have that experience one time. I wanted to make sure that I achieve something within a week. So by chance, I had no more time for these workplace activities, and I had to use the whole week to read. I had my room, closed myself there, and I told everybody, please give me time. I want to wake up, read, do everything. Within that very week, I woke up one day and I found my neck cannot turn. The neck failed to turn. From there, I learned that I need to use some time to read. After other minutes, I do the walk. I walk around, do some bit of exercise. I think it is important to appreciate that PhD one is very important because it is the highest level in academic, as one of academic achievements. It should be source of happiness, it should be source of peace, it should be source of prosperity, it should be source of all the good things we would deserve. In fact, when I was studying, one of the colleagues said, when you complete PhD, yeah, you are going to heaven. But I don't want to go to the other aspect of questioning whether when you finish you are in heaven. That will be another chapter, as Professor Agira said. But I think it is where to go. Please, I encourage everybody who's doing PhD that value time. Let's not use the time for things that don't add value. I submit. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Gideon. I think, like I said, this has been a very insightful morning, but I want to say that I've seen most people are asking for the recording, and I think you'll have it. I think the experiences you go, like even Professor Joseph Ntai said, the experiences may be different, but the actual truth is that they are meant to harden us, to be seasoned, to be strong, and to be able to contribute to society. So I would really appeal to each of us that though the experiences may be different, we should develop a heart of staying in the fight. I think at this moment, let us get the last thoughts from our beloved professors. But also, before I hand over the mic to you, Professor Joseph Ntai, you are really, this platform is doing a lot because some of us never went through this experience. You didn't have every Sunday, you have a wake-up call you can be able to be inspired. So I think we must thank you so much. But let us get the last thoughts from Professor Joseph Ntai, then Professor Vincent, then we shall have closing remarks from Professor Laura, and then we close our session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Michael Koche, for the great job that you've done. And I also extend my appreciation to Mr. Elasu Joseph, who usually coordinates the 3 to 4 a.m. Session. Thank you very much. And also Ahmed, who is not with us, who is feeling a little bit weak. But I really want to thank you all, and Professor Vincent for joining us and giving us the talk and the ideas that he has shared with us. Really, I don't have much to say because we have said everything. But as a PhD student, please remember that you need to be resilient, right? So you are able to bounce back amidst all those challenges and adversities that you will face along the way. And I'm sure if you really start thinking about resilient strategies that can make you bounce back, I'm sure you'll be able to complete your PhD and you'll enjoy the life that you live thereafter. Of course, bearing in mind the reasons why you decided to pursue a PhD. Thank you very much. Now over to my colleague, Vincent. Over to you, Vincent.
Thank you very much, Prof. Ntai. You always inspire us. You people have PhDs. Several of you people are pursuing PhD. The question, a PhD for what? This question was posed to me by a person I would hardly have expected to say it. Down in my village, in the small township, you know, the common word of a mayor, someone who stays in a town walking around in our small township, someone called mayor. Even from the time we were born, he was called mayor, and we found because he stays in town, does this and that, you know, casual jobs here and there, but loved by the community. I returned home from Nairobi. Everyone is excited there that I have a PhD, whatever it meant. He came straight to me and said, a PhD for what? And this question has driven my sense of direction up to this very morning. A PhD for what? So as you pursue your PhD, as you hang out with your PhD dear colleagues, a PhD for what? The multiple expectations continue even after the PhD is with you. In academia, the expectations are different. In the community, they are different. In your religious group, possibly they are different. In your family, they are different. I have told people that my children refuse to call me a doctor up to now. Their expectation is that if I cannot inject them, I always take them to another person to inject them. Even when I returned from Nairobi, I'm not a doctor, and they are now old. They don't know. I have not heard any one of them calling me a doctor. People in the village, people in the community say doctor or professor, whatever. They have not called me doctor at all. To them, I'm not a doctor if I'm a doctor of things that they do not understand. That's it. A PhD for what? So even when I go down there, they say, hey, doctor, people consult me. There's an old woman who consults me, her eyes are painful, she's feeling pain in the head. And if I can tell her that I'm a doctor of other things, I have lost it. So whenever she consults me on her head, on the medicine she needs, I quickly call colleagues and say, doctor, here is a lady, she has this pain and whatever, what do I buy for her? I go and buy the medicine and take to her and say, this is the medicine, or give her the money and say, go and look for this medicine. Because I'm a doctor, you people, I'm not a doctor of these things which she does not understand. A doctor of philosophy, what is philosophy? It is meaningful and useless to her. So a doctor for what? This morning, now this time is fun. Yesterday, Saturday, we had the kind of community work at the church, you know, in Kampala here. We'll go to our church, and then I went there, and so the catechist came later. We said, no, you have been teaching children catechism. Why did you have also to rush to come and find us at the church to help in the cleaning around? He says, but you people, how does someone with a PhD be carrying his soil and a wheelbarrow, and me, a catechist doesn't come? She was referring to me. A PhD for what? If colleagues come here, I have seen colleagues sending me messages, please, I will come to consult you. I'm studying this and this. You're studying what I'm sending, quantitative methods. Oh, that's my area. I say, those things, that one now, quantitative methods. I think you will look for possibly Dr. Nkurunziza is better in those things. I have lost it. A PhD for what? If a teaching assistant comes to me and says, now I want you to mentor me in publishing, a teaching assistant wants to be mentored in publishing, my goodness, give me a break. If I say that, I have lost it. A PhD for what? I wish you the best of the day, dear friends.
Thank you, Professor Laura. We could close, then we shall have a prayer from Dr. Goretti. Professor Laura, yes.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you everyone who has been on the call for this wonderful session. I'm very sure that many of us have learned, have unlearned, learned, and relearned. Today's session has been just to share experiences and encourage everyone who's on the journey that the road out there is not that smooth. It is a rough ride. And this thing of saying, why should I be taken through what you went through? Let us not dwell so much on that. Let us look at the positives in the negatives. The moment you dwell so much on the negatives, you don't move. You don't move. Always look at the negatives in a positive way. You know, I always tell my students, when you have an experience that is not like, you know, that is discouraging and all that, don't spend a lot of time looking at it as a problem. Ask yourself, what lesson do I have in this? What lesson do I have in this? Pick up lessons from all the challenges. Challenges come to build us up. Challenges come to shape us. Challenges come to give us confidence, and challenges come to teach us. You spend, a supervisor spends months without reading your work, then afterwards gives you a booklet of comments, and then you decide to put everything on hold and address those comments in 4 days. When you take the revisions to the supervisor and the supervisor says, how? There is a message there for you. There is a message there for you. So do not get discouraged and say, how come I put in all this effort and now they are rubbishing me, and now he's saying this, now he has. Yeah? Vincent boarded and went back to Uganda. After some time, he talked himself out of it and went back. But you know, that is the process. At the end of the day, the message there is calm down. Calm down. Take a deep breath. Calm down. Try to pick lessons from all the comments, from all the experiences that you are going through. No one wants to deprive you of your PhD. No one enjoys or thrives in your suffering. No, it's a process. It's a refinery process. Look at it that way, as a refinery process, because at the end of the day, we want products that will be proud of themselves. You know, we want you to come out and look at your work and say, yes, this is my work, and you're proud of it. Yeah, so it is a process. In short, what I'm saying here, friends, is that yes, you're going through all these experiences, but look at it in a positive way, and in that way, you'll be able to move. Thank you so much, Professor Ntai, for this platform. The platform encourages and teaches all of us, even us who have already gone through the journey, but we keep learning every day. For others, it is an encouragement, it's for sharing, and also we get to know who we can run to for help. Thank you, Dr. Koche, for ably handling the moderation, and for all those who have contributed, for all those who have sacrificed. Thank you so much. This session, for those who are here for the first time, these sessions happen every Sunday from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. Kindly join us again next Sunday. Thank you so much, and back to you, Michael.
Thank you so much. And let us have Dr. Goretti close with the word of prayer, and see you everyone next Sunday.
All right. Thank you, team. Thank you, Dr. Koche and Professor Bajire, Professor Ntai. We thank you so much for the interaction this morning. Let us pray. Father Lord, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for the tips and guidance given towards the aspirants, the students, and the candidates for PhD. Father Lord, we pray that we pick those lessons and be resilient in achieving our targets for PhD achievements. Father Lord, give us the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and the will to achieve what we intend to. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Enjoy your weekend. Bye.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Let's go to church.